Mauritius is a very small island nation and it has very limited sources of revenue. And we were understanding India's relations with these Indian Ocean countries. We completed our ties with Sri Lanka, Maldives, and Mauritius, and we are left with the last part of this chapter today. Let's take a look at our ties with Seychelles, which is a very brief and small topic. And after that, we will close this chapter by talking about the important regional groupings and organizations of the Indian Ocean. So let's take a look at India's ties with Seychelles. As you've seen in the map, Seychelles is another important island nation in the Indian Ocean, and it's also part of the African continent. It's located along the east coast of Africa. So it's because of its strategic location that Seychelles becomes important to India. India shares geographical proximity as well with this country, and we also have historical cultural ties as well. Just like Maldives and Mauritius, it's a very small island nation, and it has very limited sources of revenue and very limited economic opportunities. So as a result, Seychelles is another country in the Indian Ocean which is heavily dependent on India. It is quite close to India from Lakshadweep and Kerala, and there is a historical cultural connection that exists between the two countries. This historical connection goes back to our colonial era. Seychelles, not just the British, but before the British, even the French had colonized Seychelles. So since colonial times, Indian traders and workers have traveled from India, settled in Seychelles, and you have a strong Indian migrant community that is present even today. In fact, Seychelles has a very small population. Its population is hardly around 1 lakh. Out of that, 10 to 11% of the population is of Indian origin. Almost 10 to 11,000 people in Seychelles, they're of Indian origin. So that shows the deep influence that India has on the society and culture of Seychelles, especially Gujarati traders and Tamil traders and workers. They are the ones who have primarily migrated since colonial times, settled over here as well, and they form a close cultural link and as well as an economic link. So our relations are built upon these historical, cultural, economic ties. And today, maritime security has become the driving factor of this relationship. Because Seychelles is located very close to the piracy and terrorism affected areas. Near Horn of Africa, that is along the coastline of Somalia, which is the hub of piracy and even terrorism. Along this critical junction, that is where Seychelles is located. So maritime security becomes vital for Seychelles in order to safeguard its exclusive economic zone. So this is where India and Seychelles have built a strong relationship. As the country is not having enough resources on its own to defend itself, it doesn't have enough military capabilities as well to patrol its EZ, to conduct surveillance, to counter the threats posed by piracy, terrorism, and organized crime. This is where India pitches in and gives complete military assistance. Again, we have a very strong military relationship with this island country as well. So India, in a way, plays a role in carrying out surveillance and patrolling in the exclusive economic zone of Seychelles. It's very similar to how we have a relationship with Maldives and Mauritius, where we help them as well in conducting surveillance of their exclusive economic zone. So Indian Navy and Indian Air Force play a very important role. They keep visiting Seychelles very frequently. They conduct regular patrolling to assist the security forces of Seychelles in safeguarding its EEZ. And to strengthen its military capabilities, we have supplied military equipment as well. We have donated fast interceptor boats, the Dornier reconnaissance aircraft. So such military equipment has been donated by India to build the capabilities of the armed forces of Seychelles. Seychelles is another country where India has built the coastal surveillance radar system, which was inaugurated in 2015 by Prime Minister Modi. When PM Modi visited the country after Mauritius, right, he launched the Sagar Doctrine. He announced the start of the Sagar Doctrine, and he inaugurated the coastal surveillance radar, which had been built by India on the island of Seychelles. So Seychelles and Mauritius, they both got the coastal surveillance radar systems in 2015 itself. Maldives has become the latest country to join the list. Recently, even in Maldives, the coastal surveillance radars built by India have been inaugurated. So all these island chains are being interconnected with the Indian-built coastal surveillance radar system, which allows us to monitor shipping traffic in real time. We even have a joint military exercise called Lamiti. Sometimes in prelims, such a factual question can be asked. Maybe a match the following type of question where names of important military exercises is given on one side, and you're asked to match the country with which we have those exercises. So try to remember the names of these important military exercises. So Seychelles is very prone to disasters, especially tropical cyclones that form along the east coast of Africa, along the Mozambique Channel, right, between Madagascar and east coast of Africa. Tropical cyclonic activity is very common. So we assist Seychelles and even Mozambique and even Tanzania in providing disaster management assistance. The Indian Navy especially reaches out to these countries if they're hit by cyclones, and we provide basic assistance to them. We've also given a loan. A line of credit has been extended of $100 million so that Seychelles can purchase any defense equipment it wants from India. To allow Seychelles to purchase military ammunition and specific defense components, right, around $100 million worth of concessional loan has been extended as well. So this clearly is a security-based relationship, right, where we take care of the economic need of the country, we provide a lot of economic assistance as well, and along with that, we provide a lot of military defense support as well. So when PM Modi visited the country in 2015, even Seychelles leased an island to India called the Assumption Island. You can see the Assumption Island over here in the map. This is where it is located, along the east coast of Africa. It overlooks the strategic Mozambique Channel. This is the Mozambique Channel, right, which is an important shipping lane. So right at the top of Mozambique Channel, you have Assumption Island of Seychelles, which has been leased by Seychelles to India. And India plans to build transport connectivity infrastructure on the island. We want to build harbor facilities and runways so that sea and air connectivity can be established. And India and Seychelles have claimed that these are commercial projects. They've insisted that these are commercial projects aimed at improving connectivity and economic ties. But however, experts believe that even this could potentially become a foreign military base of India. If not an official military base, at least the commercial facilities can be given a military purpose, meaning Indian Navy, the naval vessels and aircraft of Indian Air Force, they can have stopovers at these facilities and get all the logistical support needed to extend their operational range. They can provide refueling, resupplies, servicing and maintenance so that Indian vessels and aircraft can dock, which can help extend the operational range of the Indian Armed Forces, thereby projecting our military power across the Indian Ocean and East Africa. So it's similar to how India has gained access to Agalaga Islands of Mauritius. Right? We studied yesterday that India has got access to Agalaga Islands of Mauritius. So during the same visit, when Sagar Doctrine was launched, when coastal surveillance radars were inaugurated in Mauritius and Seychelles. Along with getting access to Agalig Islands of Mauritius, India also got access to Assumption Island of Seychelles. But however, the project has hit a controversy. A political controversy has broken out in Seychelles. And opposition parties and locals are opposing this project. They're opposing this project. And as of now, the project has been held up because of this domestic opposition in Seychelles. This has become a hurdle. At least in Agalig Islands, we have progressed further, created some infrastructure already. Remember, I showed you a satellite map of Agalig Islands to show the kind of infrastructure India has already built. But with regard to Assumption Island, we are yet to get access because of the strong political opposition and domestic opposition being seen against the project. The locals especially are against any such foreign involvement. They don't want any militarization of their islands. But India believes that potentially China could be involved in these protests. India has reasons to believe that China might be sponsoring these protests deliberately to derail Indian projects. So this again highlights the constant strategic competition between India and China all across the Indian Ocean. So this is the special partnership that we share with Seychelles. It's largely based on defense relations and the economic assistance and the support we provide to the country. So during COVID-19, during the pandemic, we helped Seychelles as well through Mission Sagar, provided all medical supplies and essential items. Later, we gifted vaccines as well under Vaccine Maitri as part of vaccine diplomacy. So any challenge, any economic crisis the country faces, India is always there to help the country out. So apart from that, it's largely the military relationship, which focuses on maritime security. All right. So if you're able to remember these basic points, this is more than enough. See, you'll not get a separate question on Seychelles, even for that matter, even on Mauritius. But Maldives might be asked as a separate question, since Maldives is an immediate neighbor of India. But you can expect a broad question on the whole Indian Ocean region, asking you to illustrate India's approach towards Indian Ocean, what priorities, what interests does India have, and how India is protecting them. Right. So there you need to provide such examples. Take some initiatives with Mauritius, Seychelles, and Maldives and Sri Lanka, and illustrate what priorities we have in the region. So now let's look at the last part. Let's look at some important regional organizations, regional groupings that are based out of the Indian Ocean. This also gives India a platform to push the Sagar Doctrine. Through these groupings, we are promoting not just the Sagar Doctrine, but also the Indo-Pacific Doctrine of India, the Indo-Pacific vision of India. That is why these groupings are very important. The regional organizations based on the Indian Ocean, they give us this platform to promote our Sagar Doctrine and the vision of Indo-Pacific Doctrine. So let's see which are these groupings and how India engages with them. These groupings are more relevant for your prelims, right? But some of them can be important for mains as well. So previously we have studied about SAARC and BIMSTEC from the South Asia Bay of Bengal region. Now let's look at Indian Ocean groupings like IORA, Indian Ocean Rim Association or IORA. Recently, just a couple of days ago, IORA meeting took place in Sri Lanka at Colombo. You might have read in newspapers that India's Foreign Minister, Dr. Jaishankar, he paid a visit to Colombo to participate in IORA meeting. So IORA is one such important group. It's constantly in news. It has a wide portfolio where the group focuses upon, and it's an India-led grouping. India has played a critical role in establishing the group and leading this organization. The history of this group traces back to 1997 when it was established as the IORARC. Initially, it was known by a different name. It was called as Indian Ocean Region Association for Regional Cooperation, IORARC. Now the name has been restructured and simplified into just IORA, Indian Ocean Rim Association. So basically the littorals, the important rim states of Indian Ocean, they are brought together through this grouping. This idea of bringing the rim countries of Indian Ocean together was first proposed by then South African leader Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela was on a historic visit to India in 1995. He was addressing a speech, he was addressing a gathering. And that is where he suggested the idea that India and South Africa, along with Mauritius, should work together to form a grouping of the littorals of the Indian Ocean. So based on this idea proposed by Nelson Mandela, India worked with South Africa and Mauritius to establish this grouping called IORARC. All right, so now it's called IORA. So it brings together the important littorals of Indian Ocean to promote socio-economic cooperation and to promote the ties between these countries. This has become an important platform today to stabilize the Indian Ocean and to build cooperation between the rim countries. So please take a look at the members. Take a look at which countries are involved in this grouping. There are 23 member states and 11 dialogue partners. It has major powers like Australia, France, and India. France, as I told you, is an Indian Ocean power because there are French territories present, like French Reunion, La Reunion. Then we have close friends of India like Bangladesh, Indonesia. You have countries like Comoros, Iran, Kenya, Madagascar, Malaysia, Maldives, Mauritius, Mozambique, Oman, Seychelles, Singapore, Somalia, South Africa, Sri Lanka, Tanzania, Thailand, UAE, and Yemen. All right, so it brings together countries from East Africa, West Asia, South Asia, Southeast Asia, and as well as Australia. So the whole rim of Indian Ocean is almost covered by this grouping. It covers the key island nations from Maldives to Comoros to Seychelles to Madagascar. Covers important East African countries from South Africa to Somalia. Important West Asian countries from Yemen to Iran, including UAE and Oman. Key South Asian powers like Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, and important Southeast Asian countries like Indonesia, Singapore, and Thailand. So this is very important to the group lies in. There's no such grouping which brings such a diverse set of countries together. The group is so important that there are many dialogue partners which are eager to work with the group. That includes China, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Germany, Italy, Japan, South Korea, Russia, Turkey, even UK and the US. So almost all the top powers of the world are part of this organization. Right? They all engage with the grouping as dialogue partners. That itself shows you how important this organization can be. So under IORA, 7 priority areas have been identified for cooperation. Primary focus is on maritime safety and security, to deal with piracy especially, to deal with organized crime, because drug trafficking, arms trafficking is very rampant, and even counter-terrorism. These are priority areas with regard to maritime safety and security. Next, focus is on promoting trade, the commercial economic ties and investment opportunities, promoting fisheries management, as it's a shared common resource between the member countries, cooperating in disaster management, especially in providing HADR assistance to each other, as Indian Ocean is very prone to disasters, from cyclones to tsunamis. Right? Indian Ocean countries are very vulnerable. There is also cooperation in the field of education, especially higher education, science and technology and innovation. There is focus on boosting tourism in the region and promoting cultural ties, and as well as gender empowerment. These are some priority areas. So try and remember the priority areas. It can again be asked as a prelims question. All right. So IORA also focuses on issues like climate change, as rising sea levels is a major threat to Indian Ocean countries. It's a very, very serious threat to the low-lying small island states. Maldives, Seychelles, Mauritius, they're all examples. Right? Even Comoros, they're all low-lying small island states. So they're at risk of getting submerged due to rising sea levels because of climate change and global warming. So that is also a priority. And it also focuses on strategic issues like keeping the sea lanes free and open for navigation as per the UN clause provisions, ensuring that the rules-based order of UN Convention on Law of the Sea is upheld, and to safeguard the shipping lanes from piracy and other security threats. So all these are top priorities, and it also focuses on the blue economy model. India plays a direct role in encouraging the adoption of blue economy model for the Indian Ocean region. So we use the IORA platform to give a push for the blue economy, or also called as ocean economy model. Is that clear? So kindly remember the background of the group, what does it deal with, what are the focus areas, and what role is India playing to this organization. So the latest meeting, which took place at Colombo just 2 days back, India and the IORA countries have taken stock of important developments in the region. So please note down that Sri Lanka has taken over the chairmanship for the next 2 years. Previously, it was Bangladesh, which was holding the chair position from 2021 to 2023. Now this has moved to Sri Lanka, and India has assumed the vice chair position. So for the next 2 years, India will be the vice chair of this organization, which gives us a great opportunity to push our initiatives at the grouping. So as a result, IORA can be very important for your exams, as India is holding the vice chair position. Right? We are part of the Troika with Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. All three South Asian countries are part of the Troika, which is currently leading IORA. So this gives us a great opportunity to protect our interests in the Indian Ocean. So Foreign Minister Jaishankar has spoken about the priorities of India during this latest summit. He highlighted how Indian Ocean should be kept free and open, how freedom of navigation and the shipping lanes have to be protected as per UN clause provisions, which was basically a message from India to China. We have seen how China keeps disrupting freedom of navigation across the Indo-Pacific. We studied the South China Sea dispute and understood China's military aggression with regard to its maritime claims in the South China Sea. So across Indo-Pacific, you see such Chinese military aggression, which threatens free and open navigation, and it threatens the very stability of such important water bodies. So India has reiterated that UN clause provisions have to be upheld. Free and open nature of these water bodies have to be protected. These shipping lanes have to be stabilized, which is basically a message that India is sending out towards China's destabilization of the Indo-Pacific. India also has used the opportunity to promote the grouping as a voice for the global South. In diplomacy, we have something called South-South cooperation. India is a leader of South-South cooperation. When we say global South or global North, it does not refer to directions. Rather, in geopolitics, it refers to developed countries and developing underdeveloped nations. Global North includes all your developed, industrialized, advanced economies, like Western countries, all right, like European nations, Japan, US, Australia, Canada. All these are part of the global North. Developing, underdeveloped countries, like India, African countries, right, other South Asian neighbors of India, the small nations, they're all part of the global South. These are developing, underdeveloped countries. So India has been acting as the leader of the global South, and IORA is a great platform. So the Foreign Minister has reiterated that India is a Vishwamitra, a friend of the world. India is a friend of the world, and we are giving leadership to the developing, underdeveloped nations through our South-South cooperation. We are highlighting the issues of developing nations, underdeveloped countries at key platforms like IORA. We have done the same at G20 as well, recently when we hosted the G20 summit, right? And similarly, we provide a voice to the global South at platforms like IORA as well. And the Foreign Minister has highlighted India's specific focus on maritime security and blue economy, and he has pointed out some important development issues as well, which is a priority for India. So from tackling terrorism, piracy, climate change, providing for socio-economic development, all these are focus areas for India. So these were the basic issues that have been discussed at the latest meeting that took place in Colombo. All right. So these are some basic facts you should be familiar with. It's very important for your prelims. There might be a possible mains question as well. Next, another important grouping of Indian Ocean is IONS, Indian Ocean Naval Symposium. It was established in 2007 with the leadership of Indian Navy along with friendly navies from the littorals of Indian Ocean. As the name itself tells you, it's a symposium. It's like a conference. It promotes cooperation, collaboration between the top navies of the littoral states of Indian Ocean region. So it started out as an Indian initiative along with friendly navies. And usually the IONS takes place every 2 years, once in every 2 years. It's a biennial event. And recently we have started a military exercise as well. All these years, it was just a symposium. It was just a conference where the navies would come together to discuss maritime security issues. Right? Their focus obviously was maritime security in the Indian Ocean region. But last year, India has hosted the first ever military exercise of IONX, known as IMEX 22. The IONS maritime exercise. This was the first ever military exercise of the group hosted by India. It was held in the Arabian Sea off the coast of Goa. Is that clear? So it's no longer just a symposium. It has become a more formidable organization as military exercises have started under this initiative. So this group consists of several important littorals of Indian Ocean. There are almost 25 members and several observer states. So from India to Iran to France and Australia, Bangladesh, several East African countries, even Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, Qatar, all these important West Asian powers. Then Southeast Asian countries like Singapore, Thailand, right? Then major powers like UK. They're all part of this organization. Is that clear? So they all participate in these conferences, and some of them have taken part in last year's military exercise as well. These would be the observer states. All right. So as part of maritime security, these countries, these navies obviously focus on piracy, which is their top priority. That's the biggest threat in the region. Next would be organized crime, especially drugs and arms trafficking. And counterterrorism and radicalism remains the other top focus of the group, along with HADR operations and disaster management assistance. These are the focus areas of the navies of the Indian Ocean. So again, India plays a leadership role at this grouping to bring these navies together to promote collaboration between these countries. Next, the other important grouping. It's called the Colombo Security Conclave. a very, very important group led by India that brings together the regional maritime powers, the important nations of the Indian Ocean. It allows India to step up maritime security ties with Sri Lanka, Maldives, and Mauritius. These are the members of the Colombo Security Conclave. This initiative was actually formed in 2011, and initially it was just a trilateral initiative. It included only India, Sri Lanka, and Maldives when it was started. But last year, in 2022, there was a very big development at Colombo, where the Colombo Security Conclave was held. So during last year's Colombo Security Conclave, a new member joined this security initiative. It's a security grouping. Mauritius was added as a new member, along with Bangladesh and Seychelles being added as observers. Understood? So all these major countries from the Indian Ocean are being brought together under Colombo Security Conclave. This platform allows the national security advisors, the armed forces, and the intelligence agencies, along with law enforcement agencies of these countries, to cooperate and work with each other. Again, the threats are the same: piracy, organized crime, terrorism, etc. To handle these security issues, to enhance maritime security in the Indian Ocean, these countries have come together to create this platform, and they meet regularly, and they even hold regular initiatives together. Like recently, for example, Indian Coast Guard held a discussion with all the coast guards of these countries. Similarly, our NSAs from the National Security Council, the National Security Advisors, the Deputy National Security Advisors, they meet regularly to take stock of the security situation in the region. The armed forces also collaborate to the platform along with intelligence and law enforcement agencies. So this platform provides for intelligence sharing of key intelligence. It also provides for collaboration in investigation, right? So organizations like NIA, which counter terrorism, can collaborate with the investigating agencies of the other countries, right? So this has become a major platform today, which focuses on the overall security of the Indian Ocean. It's again led by India, including these countries as members and Bangladesh and Seychelles as observer states. So please note down the 5 pillars of cooperation under Colombo Security Conclave. It is maritime security and safety, counter-terrorism and radicalization, combat trafficking and transnational organized crime. Even cybersecurity is a focus. Cybersecurity has been identified as a focus area, along with protection of critical infrastructure of these countries. And finally, extending disaster management assistance, HADR assistance to each other. So these are the priorities. So since Mauritius joined the group as a member and Bangladesh and Seychelles also joined as observers, it has become even more prominent. So it is very, very important for your exams. Now coming to the last organization, the Indian Ocean Commission, or IOC. This is a grouping focused on western part of Indian Ocean towards East Africa. It brings 5 African island nations together. You can see here, within this circle, which is representing the western part of Indian Ocean region, 5 major African island countries like Seychelles, Comoros, Mauritius, La Réunion, and Madagascar. These 5 island countries are brought together to form this group called the Indian Ocean Commission. So France is a member because of its overseas territory, along with Comoros, Madagascar, Mauritius, and Seychelles. We've already studied how close we are to Mauritius and Seychelles. We obviously have very close relations with France as well, right? Comoros is another key partner for India. You might remember recently at the G20, India ensured that African Union was given membership, right? India played a critical role in providing membership to the African Union at the G20. So the African Union is currently represented by Comoros. It was the leader of Comoros who attended the G20 summit and took over the membership of African Union, represented the African Union, while AU was added as a member of G20. So that again highlights our close ties with countries like Comoros. With Madagascar as well, India is very close. We have very close security relations. With Madagascar, we even have a listening post for surveillance and intelligence gathering present in Madagascar. We have a facility at Madagascar for carrying out surveillance in the region, to collect intelligence in the region, to intercept radio traffic, to monitor the movement of vessels. So there's an important Indian listening station present in Madagascar as well. So we are naturally close to all the countries here. So India also has become part of the group, and we have joined the group as an observer state. All right, so that's why it becomes important. It was established in 1982, and it's headquartered in Mauritius. Zakier was established in Mauritious. The headquarters is Mauritius as well. Even IORA, which we studied, is headquartered in Mauritius, at Port Louis, the capital of Mauritius. Same with Indian Ocean Commission. It's headquartered at Port Louis. So Mauritius hosts 2 important groupings. One is IORA, and the other is Indian Ocean Commission. So recently, we became an observer state in 2020, and there are 7 observers in this grouping. China was already an observer. China already plays a big role in this region, along with Japan, Malta, European Union, the OIF, Organization of International Francophonie Countries, where the French language is still spoken. Because all these are French colonies, former French colonies, many of them. And even UN is an observer. So kindly remember the group, the membership and the observer states, because India was recently added in 2020 as one of the observers. All right, so that shows that we have a lot of friendly ties with all these countries. It has helped India to join this key grouping focused on Western Indian Ocean. All right, so these are the important groupings and organizations that you have to be familiar with. You can't ignore any one of them. All the points I've mentioned are equally important. Is that clear? There are many prelims questions, prelims points that are relevant for the exam, and whatever you've studied, of course, needed for your mains as well. So this completes my detailed discussion on the Indian Ocean region. If you have any questions, any doubts, please let me know. After that, we'll start with the next part of this module and focus on the Indo-Pacific. We will shift our attention towards the broader Indo-Pacific region with focus on Southeast Asia and East Asia. All right, this is another big chapter, another important chapter. So before we start with this, let's take a look at all your doubts and questions. Nagaraj is asking, sir, is observer state and dialogue countries are both the same? Both are slightly different. Observer countries or observer states have slightly more powers compared to dialogue partners. In any group, in any organization, there are 3 categories. First, you have members. Members have the maximum powers. They can not only participate in the meetings and all the gatherings, They can set the agenda. They can initiate a discussion, a dialogue on a particular issue. They can bring resolutions, propose initiatives. They can vote as well when issues are brought up for voting. So all powers are available for member states. Then you have your observers. Observers largely, they participate in the dialogue. They participate in the dialogue. They can even suggest some initiatives. They can even suggest some agenda, propose some ideas, but they can't table resolutions as such. They can't take up initiatives. They can't vote. Dialogue partners are below observers. Dialogue partners can only engage in a dialogue. They can simply attend, watch, and just take part in the dialogue which is being held. So like this, the participation varies, the powers varies from members to observers to dialogue partners. All right, but this is for your basic understanding. Nobody will ask you a question on this. So don't worry too much about the distinction between them. This might change from group to group as well. Depends on how the group is constituted. So don't worry too much about it, but just know the basic idea. What's the basic difference between these categories? Next, Shreyansh is asking why Pakistan is not part of IORA. Pakistan has applied for IORA. Pakistan is very interested. It is India which has kept Pakistan out of IORA. Because we have seen what Pakistan does at SAARC. It keeps blocking our initiatives, derails Indian initiatives. So we don't want IORA to become another SAARC. So India is the one which has blocked Pakistan's entry. Deliberately, we have kept Pakistan out. Surya is asking why US is not interested in IONS. US is also interested, but other members have not agreed to accept the US as of now. Satya Prasad is asking, what's the role of observer nations? I just mentioned that. Ishan is asking, what's the benefit of China to calling Indian Ocean as Asia Pacific? See, China insists that the term Asia Pacific should be used over the term Indo-Pacific. And the answer is very obvious. China doesn't want the reference to Indian Ocean, which highlights the primacy of India in the region. I explained in the very first class, right? In the first class on Indian Ocean, I told you that this whole water body takes its name from India, from the Indian subcontinent. So it establishes Indian Ocean as our primary backyard, as India's primary area of influence, primary sphere of influence. So China doesn't want the primacy of India in the Indo-Pacific. That's why it does not want the region to be referred to as Indo-Pacific. It keeps insisting that this is Asia-Pacific, which will be more China-centric. Is that clear? So that is the reason why China pushes for the name Asia-Pacific over Indo-Pacific. Madhu is asking, Francophonie group includes France or only French-speaking colonies? It includes both. OIF, which is an organization of Francophonie countries, brings together France, the former colony, with its the former colonial power, with its former colonies, where the French language is still spoken. So all these countries, which are former French colonies, they come together with France to form the Francophonie group. It is similar to how we have the Commonwealth, right? The Britain, the UK, and all its former colonies, the former British colonies, they have the Commonwealth grouping. Similarly, you have the Francophonie countries, which are groupings of all the French colonies and the countries today where French language is spoken, along with France. Yashpal Singh is asking, what is the importance of multiple groups of same countries? Can't they compromise working of these groups? Or does it create confusion, sir? See, these groupings have their own set agenda. Yes, sometimes you will see an overlap. There will be common members, common initiatives, but each platform has its own purpose and agenda. Now, Colombo Security Conclave is a more closer group for India. Colombo Security Conclave brings our closest partners in the region together from South Asia and Indian Ocean. IORA is a much larger grouping that brings all the major powers of the region together, all the littorals together. So every platform serves a different purpose. It has its own agenda. Yes, there will be an overlap, but it is needed in order to protect regional interests. Ritika is asking, when will you discuss previous year questions? How to write answers? We have discussed few questions in the last week. We will take it up again this week as well. All right. So guys, these are the questions. Now, let's proceed with the next chapter, the next module. Let's look at Southeast Asia and East Asia, which is a key part of the Indo-Pacific region. Now, I'm going to expand the discussion. We were until now just talking about Indian Ocean. I'm going to expand this discussion and broadly look at Indo-Pacific, which is today the global hub of all economic and geopolitical developments. From China to US to India, even to European countries, all of them are focusing on the Indo-Pacific. There is intense competition in the Indo-Pacific today. And this is where India's approach towards the region becomes very, very critical. So in the Indo-Pacific, which covers the entire region from Indian Ocean to Pacific Ocean, the most important region here would be Southeast Asia and East Asia. This region lies at the very heart of the Indo-Pacific, at the very center of the Indo-Pacific. Please look at the map here for a second. I want you guys to appreciate the strategic location of Southeast Asian countries and East Asian countries. All right, I want you guys to be familiar with the places, the locations, because based on the geography, it's easier to understand geopolitics. So all these countries here, from Myanmar to Indonesia, Philippines to Vietnam, all these countries, they represent the strategic Southeast Asia region. Historically, India has had very good ties with the region. I'm talking about ancient medieval times. Since ancient medieval times, we have trading relations and cultural relations with the region. Right, from Cholas, for example, who dominated the region, to Pallavas, we always had contact with this region. You find very strong Buddhist, Hindu, and Islamic influences that bind the two civilizations. There are a lot of cultural features that bind us together. And today we have many common interests across the region, which brings us together. So in a way, Southeast Asia is our extended neighborhood. By looking at this map, you can realize that it's an extended neighborhood of India. It's located right on the periphery of our neighborhood. So it's an extended neighborhood of India, and we share historical ties, economic and cultural ties with the region. And today we have common concerns which drives India together with the Southeast Asian countries. Similarly, take a look at East Asia, which is equally important. East Asia will primarily include Japan, the Korean Peninsula comprising of North and South Korea. China is seen as an East Asian country along with Mongolia. Then the other Chinese territories like Taiwan, Macau, and Hong Kong. All these are part of East Asia. So when it comes to East Asia, India's priority is like-minded countries such as Japan, South Korea, and even Mongolia. As China is a major concern in East Asia and the Indo-Pacific, India seeks out very close ties with these countries, these like-minded countries, which also have the same concerns about Chinese aggression. Mongolia has standing disputes, boundary disputes with China. China acts very aggressively against Mongolia as well. That is why India has built very close relations with Mongolia. We have close defense relations and strategic relations with Mongolia today. We even conduct a military exercise with Mongolia. It's called Nomadic Elephant. Nomadic Elephant is a major military exercise between Indian and Mongolian forces. Is that clear? Elephant represents India. Nomadic groups represents Mongolia. As several communities, indigenous communities in Mongolia, they're nomadic. So we have very close defense, security, and strategic ties with Mongolia, and we even have strong economic relations which is being built up. We have given concessional loans to Mongolia as well, mainly to counterbalance the Chinese aggression in the region. Just like China gets closer to Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Myanmar, which are neighbors of India, we are trying to get closer to Mongolia, which is a neighbor of China. We have very good ties today with like-minded countries such as South Korea and Japan, which are democracies that are aligned with the Western countries. Both South Korea and Japan are aligned with Western countries led by the US. They're all part of the same power bloc, and they all have standing issues with China. We mentioned the Senkaku Diaoyu Island dispute over here in the East China Sea. We discussed how China has been very aggressive against Japan over the Senkaku Diaoyu dispute. So be it Japan, be it India, Mongolia, or South Korea, we are all at the receiving end of Chinese aggression. So that is why East Asia becomes very important for India. We do share historical links as well, cultural links with the region. And today India is all the more closer to Japan and South Korea. Right? There are common factors that drive us together. And that is why East Asia becomes another key component of the Indo-Pacific. Even if you look at this historically, right, there's an age-old cultural link that binds India with Korea, India with Japan. For example, I don't know if you know this. If you look at the Korean language, right, it shares a lot of similarities with Tamil. Tamil and Korean are very, very similar. In fact, several words are exactly the same. They mean the same. They're used in the same context. There's a direct linguistic link with Japan as well. Buddhism that traveled from India forms a strong cultural link, a historical link. So these historical connections have often been neglected. That is why today India is paying more attention to revive these cultural ties and historical ties and focus on contemporary issues. So both Southeast and East Asia become very, very crucial for us in the Indo-Pacific. So India has a dedicated policy towards these regions, which was previously called the Look East policy of India, and today it has been upgraded to the Act East policy of India. So in this chapter, we're going to study the Look East, Act East policy. We'll understand which countries are covered under the policy, when was it launched, what was the purpose, how are they different, and we'll also discuss some major Indian initiatives and take up some important countries and study our ties with these important countries. So the Look East policy that was launched in the year 1991 primarily applied for Southeast Asian and East Asian region. The goal was to improve India's ties with these countries, the 10 ASEAN countries, which are part of the ASEAN group, that brings the 10 Southeast Asian countries together. Is that clear? Southeast Asia is represented by these 10 major countries: Myanmar, Laos, Thailand, Cambodia and Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, Philippines and Brunei. These 10 countries are part of a very, very important, powerful grouping called ASEAN. So along with improving ties with the ASEAN group and the 10 Southeast Asian countries, we are focused on East Asian powers as well, such as Japan and South Korea. So this is the Look East policy of India that was launched in the year 1991. This has been upgraded to the Act East policy in 2014. Is that clear? So it's a dedicated foreign policy doctrine of India that pays special attention to Southeast Asia and East Asia, and we are implementing this from more than 30 years right now. All right. So let's understand the evolution of this policy. Why was a separate policy needed for the region? What was the reason behind it? What's the rationale behind it? See, in 1991, India and the world were facing a very unique challenge. There were many external and internal developments which were creating challenges for India, which were threatening India's national interests. For example, in 1991, the Cold War came to an end. The Cold War ended with the collapse and disintegration of Soviet Union. So with the collapse of Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War rivalries, India lost a key friend in global geopolitics. At the global level, one of the biggest supports that we were relying upon was support from Soviet Union, especially at platforms like United Nations. Right? One of the biggest support for India all the time was from Soviet Union, because India had aligned with Soviet Union in 1971. So when Soviet Union collapsed, it was a big blow for India, as we didn't have many friends at that point. We didn't have very close ties with other countries. Doesn't mean we were not having any kind of relations with others. We did have ties with others as well, but we weren't very, very close to other countries and regions. In fact, from 1947 till 1991, India was preoccupied. India was preoccupied in its own neighborhood with South Asian neighbors and with the big powers, the P5. This had become our only focus during these 4 decades. If you look at Indian foreign policy, our maximum attention, energy and resources, they were all dedicated to South Asia itself, to our neighborhood, where we were facing many, many challenges with our neighbors. Along with that, we were prioritizing ties with the big 5, the P5 countries. This had become our foreign policy focus during the 4 decades after independence. Now that the global geopolitics was changing, a major geopolitical change was taking place. India had lost a key friend at the global level. The time had come for India to diversify its foreign relations. Understood? The time had come for India to diversify foreign relations of India, to look out for new partners, to build stronger friendships with others who could also provide the required global support to India. This was a driving factor for India to launch the Look East policy. Parallelly, we faced few internal challenges as well within the country, which was the grave economic crisis that India was facing. We have studied about the BOP crisis in Indian economy, the balance of payments crisis. Our forex reserves had depleted. We barely had enough reserves left for another 10 to 12 days of imports. Right? So India was staring at a major crisis, a complete default, very similar to how Sri Lanka is currently facing the crisis. So at this point, India took support from IMF. We took a bailout package from IMF. We were not comfortable with it because IMF imposes conditions. The IMF, which is dominated by Western countries, always imposes conditions on those who receive help from IMF. It compromises your economic sovereignty. So India was not very happy, but we didn't have a choice. So we ended up taking support from IMF. And along with that, then Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao, along with his finance minister Manmohan Singh, they took a massive decision to introduce the LPG reforms in the country. To revive the Indian economy from this crisis, to rebuild the Indian economy, India was liberalized, privatized, and globalized. We were entering the era of globalization around the world, where countries were opening up from their conservative economic policies and focusing on globalization, creating global markets. So India liberalized many key sectors, relaxed the government controls of the socialist era. It privatized many loss-making government industries and entities and globalized the Indian economy, connected the Indian economy with the world. So this meant we needed new markets for our exports. We had to find more markets where we could export our goods and support our farmers and producers. We wanted raw materials, which we didn't have, to drive growth. Essential resources were needed, right, to procure the basic raw materials from other countries. And we also needed investments, foreign investments. Now that we had liberalized and globalized, we were looking for FDI and FII investments, right? So we wanted other countries to bring investments into India. We wanted to secure key raw materials needed for driving India's growth. And we needed new markets as well, where we could export our products and commodities. This became a necessity, a priority for the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister. And it was this which pushed Prime Minister Narasimha Rao to launch the Look East policy in 1991. It was a combination of all these factors. On one hand, the geopolitical changes happening externally, right? This formed a strong political rationale. The other was the economic rationale, because of the domestic internal crisis India was going through, right? India had initiated LPG reforms, so we needed new partners where we could export, where we could procure raw materials, from where we could attract investments. It was these economic necessities and geopolitical realities that drove the Narasimha Rao government to launch this major initiative called Look East Policy of India, launched in 1991. It marked the diversification of Indian foreign policy. We started paying more attention, more focus to other countries and regions which otherwise were neglected previously. It does not mean we didn't have ties with them. We had ties with all these countries, but it wasn't very strong. We hadn't paid special attention to these countries and regions. Until 91, we were largely focused and preoccupied with our own neighbors and the P5 countries. So now we were diversifying. Post 91, you can see a diversification in India's foreign policy, where we opened up to Southeast and East Asia, started paying more attention to these regions. We started focusing more on Africa and Latin America as well, which previously hadn't got much attention. And we finally established ties with Israel in 1992. Until 1992, we did not have ties with Israel. Now that we were diversifying our foreign policy, we got an opportunity to not just improve ties with these important regions and pay more attention to the countries present here, but we finally established official ties with Israel in the year 1992. So this marked the complete transformation of Indian foreign policy. That is why launching of Look East policy is a milestone in Indian foreign policy. UPSC might ask you a 10 marks question. Don't think it's an old topic and neglect it. You should not just know what is Look East, you should know the evolution and the rationale behind it. UPSC might ask you to explain this. Why was Look East policy launched in 1991? What pushed the Narasimha Rao government to launch this initiative? What were the driving factors? You need to provide this analysis very, very clearly. Now, what was the priority for India? What was the focus? What strategy did we employ? Under the Look East, our focus was on 3 areas, and in the same order. In this order, we had 3 priority focus areas. One was to build close economic and commercial relations, improve trade basically, revisit our economic ties and improve them further to boost trade between the two sides. Second was to increase strategic security competition or cooperation. And third was to focus on historical, cultural, ideological links. These were the pillars of Look East policy, and in the exact same order. All right, the first focus was economic commercial relations, improving trade, creating more opportunities for growth for both the sides. Second was defense, maritime security, and other strategic security issues. Right? And finally, historic, cultural, ideological, civilizational links as part of soft power diplomacy. This became the priority of the Look East policy of India. Understood? So under the Look East, India has seen many successes and achievements. We have had a lot of success in achieving these goals, and there are many achievements that we can list out. This determines the features of the Look East, the contours of the Look East policy. One important feature of the policy is that we've always tried to link Northeast India closely with Southeast Asia to act as a bridge that could connect India with Southeast Asian markets. Under Look East, more attention has been given to Northeast India, which had been historically affected by insurgency, poor connectivity, and poor development. Until 1990s, Northeast India had not got enough attention with regard to infrastructure creation, connectivity projects, development initiatives, etc. And the region was badly affected by multiple insurgencies, which was having cross-border support from Myanmar and Bangladesh. So to counter the insurgency threat and to provide better development, connectivity, and growth to Northeast India, India envisioned Northeast region as a bridge which would connect with Myanmar and form this direct link between India and Southeast Asia. This remains one of the priorities under the Look East Act East policy. Is that clear? We studied this, if you remember, under India-Myanmar. I pointed out how Myanmar is like a land bridge. How Myanmar is like a land bridge that connects the Northeast region with Southeast Asian markets. It can drive growth and export opportunities for Northeast India. It can attract investments towards Northeast India from Southeast Asia. Right? So this is a priority, one of the key features of Look East policy. As part of deepening economic and trade relations, we have successfully signed free trade agreements such as SECA or SEPA, Comprehensive Economic Cooperation Agreement or Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. These are essentially free trade agreements that reduce barriers to trade the tariff barriers and non-tariff barriers are tackled through free trade agreements. And we have signed such free trade agreements with Malaysia, Japan, and with the entire ASEAN group. Please make a note of this point. India has signed separate FTAs with Malaysia and Japan as part of Look East policy. It marks the success of the Look East, which has improved our economic ties with Southeast Asian and East Asian countries. And we have signed an FTA with the entire ASEAN regional grouping. There's an India-ASEAN FTA, which we're going to look at later. This is another major success seen under the Look East policy. Another important feature is that there has been regular proactive involvement and engagement at the highest level between the two sides. From 1991 till 2014, right, that's when Look East policy was implemented. There would be regular visits by prime ministers, presidents, and by top ministers and officials to keep up high-level engagement and to drive the relationship. The Indian prime ministers would visit Southeast Asia every single year, at least a couple of times. Even President and Vice President of India would travel frequently. Even the leaders of these countries, the prime ministers, presidents of Southeast Asian countries would be invited frequently to India. Top cabinet ministers and government officials would also meet and interact. So this regular, proactive, high-level engagement sustained the diplomatic relations and provided for close bond and trust to be developed between the two sides. Another important success and feature is that defense security ties improved slightly. You didn't see a major growth in defense security ties, but a slight improvement was seen with some focus on maritime security. For example, we started holding military exercises. Have you heard of a military exercise called Milan? It's organized by Indian Navy. It's a multinational naval exercise that brings many Southeast Asian countries together as well. India invites many countries for Milan naval exercise. So from Southeast Asia, we invite Thailand, Singapore, Indonesia, Vietnam. All these navies are also invited. So military exercises, defense cooperation, right, became a focus under Look East policy. So we do share very good defense relations today with several countries here, from Vietnam to Singapore, to Myanmar, Thailand, Indonesia, and Philippines. We have managed to improve our defense ties with these countries. Vietnam became a strategic partner in the defense domain during the implementation of Look East policy. That was a big success. We started building very close defense relations. We'll be studying this as well later under India-Vietnam relations. Singapore became a close defense partner. Singapore, which is a city-state, it has a shortage of land and airspace. So Singapore's Navy, Army, and Air Force, they don't get enough space to train and practice and conduct exercises. So it depends on India for allowing access to their armed forces to conduct training. Is that clear? We have such a close arrangement. Singapore's Air Force, right? The moment they take off, they'll reach Indonesia or Malaysia. They'll cross Singapore's airspace. So they don't have enough airspace to practice, to train, to conduct drills. So they come to Indian military bases and train in Indian airspace. That is the kind of arrangement we have provided. Singapore's Navy ventures into Indian waters towards Bay of Bengal and conducts exercises, and we allow them to do that. Same with Myanmar. We studied our close defense relations. Right? We have given funds, weapons, and training to Myanmar's forces, and we have even gifted a submarine recently. With Thailand and Indonesia as well, we have very close ties that has been built over the years, and as well as with Philippines. So there has been some improvement, if not a major improvement. A slight improvement was noticed in defense security ties under Look East policy. All right. We were invited to Singapore during this period to the Malabar naval exercise. In 2007, we expanded the Malabar naval exercise one time. It was just a bilateral exercise till then between India and US. But in 2007, for the first time, we expanded it and invited Japan and Australia along with Singapore. But after China retaliated against it, we suspended Malabar and returned it back to the bilateral Malabar exercise between just India and US. But as we studied, we have now expanded Malabar again and brought back Japan and Australia in the last few years. So we have studied this in previous chapters. We'll take a look at this again when we study Japan and Australia. So under Look East, there has been an improvement, a slight improvement at least in defense security ties, and definitely we have helped in revitalizing our historical cultural links. Our Buddhist heritage has been revitalized through Buddhist Circuit Initiative. Connectivity has improved, which is driving tourism. Is that clear? India has been involved in renovating some historical monuments like Angkor Wat and other temple complexes in Cambodia. As I mentioned the other day, you find very deep Hindu influences in Cambodia, right? Even across Vietnam, Thailand, you find very strong Hindu and Buddhist influences that trace back to India. So the Angkor Wat temple, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, it's the world's largest temple complex. It's a Vishnu temple dedicated to Lord Vishnu, right? This temple, and there are other monuments as well, Hindu and Buddhist monuments in Cambodia, which were suffering from damage and some neglect. So restoration of these cultural sites and monuments had become a problem for Cambodia. Cambodia is a very backward country that way. So this is where India has stepped in. Our Archaeological Survey of India has helped Cambodian authorities to conserve and restore important sites like Angkor Wat and other important Hindu Buddhist sites located in Cambodia. So you do see a direct improvement in historical cultural ties between the two sides. So if you ask me, these are the successes, achievements of Look East, and it defines the contours, the features of Look East policy of India. So this was successfully implemented from 1991 till 2014, till the Modi government came to power. Understood? So when Prime Minister Modi came to power, the Look East policy was upgraded to the Act East policy. Because despite all the success and achievements and the positive initiatives taken under Look East, there were certain shortcomings in the policy. Right? There were some drawbacks. There were some shortcomings where we could improve, where we could do better. So that is why this new term was coined. That instead of just looking eastwards, India should act eastwards. It means we should be more proactive and engage the eastern regions to drive Indian influence. Experts started suggesting that it's not enough just to look east, but we should start acting eastwards. So this policy was adopted, which is seen as an upgraded policy. It's not an entirely new policy. Please understand that. It's not that Act East is completely different from Look East. Actually, Act East is very similar to Look East. There are many similarities, common areas. The only difference is that it is a better version. It's an upgraded version designed to address the shortcomings of Lookie's policy. Understood? It was launched by Prime Minister Modi when he attended the East Asia ASEAN Summit, which was hosted in Myanmar in 2014. So by choosing to announce this in Myanmar, India was sending a message to Myanmar that we are looking at Myanmar as a land bridge to link with Southeast and East Asia. So during that year's ASEAN East Asia Summit, which was held back to back, PM Modi, who was attending the summit, announced the launch of Act East policy, which was an upgradation of the previous Lookie's policy. It basically provides better focus and attention to Southeast and East Asia region and beyond. It has been brought out by keeping in mind the rising Chinese aggression in the Indo-Pacific. So you can say that Act East policy is part of the larger Indo-Pacific doctrine of India. The broad Indo-Pacific vision of India, it encompasses the Act East policy. It's a part of it. So the renewed attention and focus we are giving to Southeast and East Asian countries and this region is mainly by keeping an eye on China's rising aggression and influence. Also, India's aspirations have grown. Don't forget that. It's not just about China. Even India's aspirations have grown and improved. We are aspiring to be a global power. So we want further investments, access to markets. We want to cooperate in key areas of defense and security as well. Further improve trade and economic relations with all these like-minded countries. So that is why the Look East was upgraded to Act East, so that India could drive its national interests in the region, not just to counter China across Indo-Pacific, but also to promote India's own influence and economic interests. Now let's see, what are the main features of Act East policy and how does it differ from Look East? This can be a mains question. You can get a 15 marks question in mains, where UPSC will be asking you to compare Look East and Act East policy. Since I told you that Look East had few shortcomings despite all its achievements, and Act East was an upgraded version of Look East, so such a question can definitely come up. A very conceptual question can come up, asking you to highlight the changes that India has made, the upgrade or the improvements that India has made under Act East as compared to the previous version, which is the Look East. So according to me, there are 5 major features which are noticeable, which marks the difference between Look East and Act East. If you can remember the 5 points and present them with relevant examples, that will complete your answer. Is that clear? So let us see what these important differences are. The first major point, according to me, is that under Act East, there is more focus on achieving tangible action and concrete results. See, under Look East policy, we were making a lot of promises. We were launching many initiatives. But problem was many of these projects, they would be delayed or not implemented properly. This has been a persistent problem with Look East policy. Remember, we studied a few important projects like Kaladan project, IMT Trilateral Highway. None of these projects are completed even today. They were started under Look East policy. It was a big success when we started it. But due to various problems and challenges, we have not fulfilled the promise. The commitments that were made, the initiatives that were launched, they've all been delayed or not implemented properly. So that is one thing that India wants to change. Going forward, we want to achieve tangible results, concrete, measurable results to tangible action. And that is a major focus here. Improving the implementation. Improve the implementation is the focus. All right. The second major difference, the second upgrade that you notice. Under the Look East, India ended up paying more attention to Southeast Asia, with very limited attention given to East Asia and beyond. Compared to East Asia, Southeast Asia got more focus. This is something you can observe in Look East policy. If you look at the 20 years of its implementation, you will notice that more achievements were seen in Southeast Asia compared to East Asia. The focus was largely on the Southeast Asia region compared to East Asia. The engagement with East Asia also was limited to an extent. So that can be seen as a shortcoming, and we are trying to improve that. We are trying to extend this focus and treat not just Southeast Asia as a central pillar, but extend this to other countries, other regions, from Japan to even Australia in the South Pacific, South Korea, US, etc., which is a direct response to the rising assertiveness and aggression of China. Understood? That is a major difference that you find. There is focus not just on Southeast Asia, but focus on East Asia and the Pacific as well. We are paying attention to even Far East region, the Pacific region, right? The Far East region of Russia, further extending towards the Arctic, then the Pacific, especially the South Pacific, towards Australia and the Pacific Islands. They've all become the focus following China's aggressive rise and assertive rise. This is another big difference you find, the focus region. Previously, the focus region largely became Southeast Asia with a limited focus on East Asia. But right now, there is more attention on not just Southeast Asia, but across East Asia, Far East of Russia, which is the Siberia region, parts of the Arctic, the North Pacific, and the South Pacific as well. The Arctic, North Pacific region, and the South Pacific region towards Australia, New Zealand, and the Pacific Island countries. So all these areas are seen as part of this approach, where we are further projecting activities beyond East Asia region. That is a big difference that you find. Next, there is greater boldness on India's part in engaging these countries in the defense and security domain. Under Look East, the focus on defense and security was limited. Under the Look East policy, even though some improvements happened in defense and security, but the focus was very less. Under Look East, more attention was given to economic relations and cultural relations. That's where the biggest improvements happened. Is that clear? Under Look East, there was a bigger success seen in economic ties and cultural ties compared to defense security relations. So there was a little hesitation to say on India's part, also on Southeast Asian countries on their part as well, in focusing on defense security and strategic ties. But today there is greater boldness on India's part. We are not hesitating anymore, and we are more open and proactive about improved defense and security collaboration. So today, under Act East, maritime security has been prioritized. It's a key focus area. Intelligence sharing has become a top focus with the friendly countries. Then countering all the security threats from terrorism to organized crime, right? All of this has become a focus under Act East policy, all the security issues. Even cybersecurity is becoming a focus. So this is a major difference that you notice between the Look East and Act East policy. There is more boldness on India's part in engaging on these issues with the Southeast Asian and East Asian countries. The fourth difference you find is that along with building cordial cooperative relations with groupings like ASEAN, India is becoming more hard-nosed. Meaning we are striking a stronger bargain. We are trying to strike a stronger bargain when we negotiate with powerful groupings like ASEAN. Is that clear? Because previously under the Look East, we had a problem. One problem was that the free trade agreement we signed with ASEAN had a lot of drawbacks. See, ASEAN is a very powerful regional group. Even though Southeast Asian countries are small individually, when they come together collectively as a group, they become a very formidable organization. ASEAN is a very strong political and economic union for that matter. So when India negotiated the FTA and signed this free trade agreement, it was designed to benefit both India and the ASEAN countries. But over a period of its implementation, we have noticed that the FTA has largely benefited ASEAN countries more than India. Because of the India-ASEAN FTA, a lot of cheap imports from Southeast Asia have flooded the Indian market, and it has threatened our domestic producers. Our domestic industries, our farmers have been affected. They have not been able to compete with high-quality, cheaper products coming from Southeast Asian markets. So this has become one of the drawbacks of India-ASEAN FTA, right? So India feels that under Look East, we weren't hard-nosed in our negotiations. We gave off some concessions maybe. So we believe that we should be more hard-nosed and strike a stronger bargain in these talks to protect our core domestic interests. Because ASEAN countries can be very hard-nosed to strike a strong bargain. So we will be very cordial, friendly, polite, maintain all diplomatic niceties while taking a strong stand on core issues which are being negotiated. This is one important feature that you find. This is a direct result of the bitter experience we have had with the India-ASEAN FTA. India-ASEAN FTA has benefited both the sides. The trade volume has increased. Definitely India's exports of goods and services to Southeast Asian markets has gone up multiple times. All right. Similarly, export of Southeast Asian products to India has increased multiple times. So it has been a big benefit for both. But however, there is a trade imbalance. Southeast Asian countries have benefited more with larger exports to India, driving high-quality, cheaper products into the Indian market, which is bringing a flood of cheap imports that is affecting our domestic producers. Our domestic industries and farmers are not able to compete with that, which is taking a hit on our domestic industry. So that is a major concern we have. We feel that we should have struck a stronger negotiation and struck a stronger bargain. So that is another feature you find in Act East policy. India is being more hard-nosed in its negotiations. And finally, the last feature, there is sharper focus on prioritizing the Northeast region and connecting it with not just Southeast Asia, but also East Asia. We are looking to drive more investments from Southeast and East Asia towards the Northeast. We are looking to improve connectivity and create a better gateway that can link the Northeast region with Southeast Asian and East Asian markets. So that's another key difference you find. In the Look East policy as well, there was focus on Northeast India, but it wasn't enough. That's what India has felt. So there's sharper focus on setting up Northeast India as a bridge, as a gateway to link closely with Southeast Asia and even East Asia. In fact, you can already see that working. For example, Japan today has become a major investor in Northeast India. Japan is funding many key projects across Northeastern states. And the exports from Northeast India to Southeast Asia has gone up by a very big margin. Right? So these are some positive changes that you can see in Act East policy, which is essentially an improved version. That is a better way of explaining Act East. I would call it an improved version, or basically an upgrade of the Look East policy. It's not that it's an entirely new policy. It's not that both are starkly different. In fact, both of them are actually very similar. The priorities, focus areas are very similar. It's the approach which is changing. So it's more of a upgraded version or a better improved version designed to address the shortcomings of Look East policy. So kindly pay attention to this topic. You can expect a mains question on these lines. A 15 marks question can come, asking you to explain what differences do you notice between Look East and Act East. Explain with examples. So these 5 points have to be brought out with some relevant examples as I was mentioning. All right. So this is enough. It's more than enough to understand Southeast and East Asia region. Now, after a short break, let's focus on some important countries. I will be picking up 2 important countries for a detailed discussion. India, Japan, and later India, Vietnam. All right, so take a 15 minutes break. Let's come back in 15 minutes. I think it will be 7:55. Let's try to come back by 7:55. All right, so see you in 15 minutes and we'll start with the next part of this module. The strongest and closest relationship. So from Southeast and East Asia, it has to be Japan and Vietnam. These two are the most important countries for India. So let's look at India-Japan relations first. With Japan, today we share a very historical and a strategic relationship. Right? We're very, very close to Japan today. We share very close economic relations and as well as defense, security, and strategic ties. But if you look at it historically, the common link, cultural historical link, has been Buddhism. Buddhism, which traveled from India towards East Asia, has influenced many countries, from China to South Korea to Japan. Right? You find very strong influences across Southeast Asia as well. So this Buddhist connection forms a direct link, a bond between India and Japan, a historical bond. But however, in modern times, especially during the World War, the Second World War, we ended up on the opposite sides of the conflict. India had aligned with the Allied powers, with Britain, US, France, and others. Right? India was fighting for British India, whereas Japan had aligned with the Axis powers. In fact, Imperial Japan had become a notorious fascist power. It had aligned with right-wing extreme fascism. It had aligned with Hitler's Nazi Germany, Mussolini's Italy, right? So Imperial Japan was a very notorious power. It was a fascist country that committed brutal atrocities all across Asia, from China to Korea to Southeast Asia. Even today, Japan is hated for the atrocities that their ancestors committed. Just like Nazi Germany committed brutalities against the Jews and others. Similarly, Imperial Fascist Japan committed brutal atrocities all across Asia. So we were the opposite sides of the conflict, and we even engaged each other. We even engaged in a military conflict in Singapore and in the border areas of Nagaland and Burma. In this area, Indian soldiers have fought against Imperial Fascist Japanese forces. Indian troops fighting for British India, they have fought against Japanese forces during the World War period. So that is a very different era, a very different phase of our history. But as you know, Second World War came to an end with the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The nuclear bombing that decimated Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Japan had refused to surrender. It was continuing the war, even after Germany, Italy, and others had surrendered. The US, which had developed and tested nuclear weapons, would go on to drop nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which forced the surrender of Japan. Japan was defeated, right, and finally surrendered, which brought the Second World War to an end. So Japan became the only country to suffer the horrors of nuclear war. Right? It's become the only country where the nuclear attack had a huge devastating impact. So following this defeat, Japan underwent a complete transformation. It underwent a political, economic, and cultural and social transformation. The United States, which emerged victorious and emerged as the global power, it enforced a pacifist constitution on Japan to ensure that Japan will never become an aggressive power like before. Is that clear? Even today, Japan follows a pacifist constitution which prohibits Japan from going to war. Believe it or not, Japan is not allowed to have armed forces under the pacifist constitution. It cannot pursue nuclear weapons under the pacifist constitution. See, that's one reason why Japan does not possess nuclear weapons. Even though it has the technology, if it wants, it can easily develop nuclear weapons even today. It has the money, it has the technology, the resources. But Japan has firmly stayed away from it because the pacifist constitution prohibits Japan from being an aggressive military power. And it's not just that. As Japan is the only victim of nuclear war, it has taken a moral, principled stand against nuclear weapons. Japan has a very strong commitment to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. It gives utmost importance to the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which we have mentioned and studied in previous classes. So this is how Japan became a more calm and stable country and immediately started focusing on reconstruction. The US guaranteed the defense of Japan, as Japan was not allowed to have its own armed forces. Even today, Japan does not have regular armed forces. Like India, US, or China, Japan does not have regular armed forces even today. Japan has something known as self-defense forces, meant only for the defense of the country. Because of its pacifist constitution, it cannot take up any offensive, aggressive military action against any country. It can't raise offensive armed forces. So it has self-defense forces for defending the country, and it has a strong commitment to Non-Proliferation Treaty, and it has given up the pursuit of nuclear weapons forever. It has a very strong commitment for non-proliferation. It doesn't want the further spread of nuclear weapons, as it is the only country to have suffered the horrors of nuclear war. So this is what defines modern Japan today. Very quickly, the country built itself. It underwent a reconstruction and emerged as an advanced, developed economy within years. That is the technological might of Japan, right? It focused on its economic growth, leveraged its technological advantage, and emerged as an industrialized, developed, advanced economy very quickly. And in order to correct this image from the World War, it started assisting developing underdeveloped nations in their growth. It started a soft power initiative to win friendships around the world, to correct its historical image. Because post the World War, the Japanese people are apologetic. They are apologetic of what Imperial Fascist Japan had done. Right? They're ashamed of their past, their history. So to correct the image and to do justice to the affected areas around the world, it started a program called ODA, Overseas Development Assistance. Through this program, it has provided concessional loans to several countries, including India. It has offered concessional loans and provided investments to fund key development projects around the world, and India is one of the biggest beneficiaries of Japan's ODA program. Is that clear? So today, the relations are completely different. During the World War, we were on the opposite sides, right? But as Japan transformed, adopted a pacifist constitution, gave up its aggression, we have formed a very close relationship, especially after the end of the Cold War. Because during Cold War, Japan had aligned with, obviously, the Western Bloc, the United States. The US had guaranteed to defend Japan. As Japan's military was disbanded, right? Japan was demilitarized. The US guaranteed defense and protection on behalf of Japan. So Japan was firmly aligned with the US during the Cold War. So until 1991, we didn't have very, very strong ties. We had very basic, decent, friendly relations where we were getting some assistance in the form of concessional loans to fund key projects in India. But today, because of common interests, mutual strategic concerns and interests, the two countries have become very, very close partners as there is a convergence in their interests in the Indo-Pacific. Just like India has many concerns about China and other issues affecting the Indo-Pacific, Japan also has similar issues and concerns. So these common interests and mutual strategic concerns drive the India-Japan relationship today. As I told you, India is one of the biggest beneficiaries of Japan's financial aid, which is delivered to its ODA program, the Overseas Development Assistance Program. Many key infrastructure projects in India, they're all funded with Japanese concessional loans. Be it the metro rail projects in major cities like Delhi and Bengaluru. The Delhi Metro, for example, a part of Bengaluru Metro and other cities as well. They're funded with Japanese loans and even Japanese technology. The DFC project, the Dedicated Freight Corridor. You would have studied this in current affairs or in Indian economy. The Western and Eastern Dedicated Freight Corridor. It's essentially a freight corridor, a railway link to carry cargo, to carry freight from from Delhi towards Mumbai, and from Punjab towards Kolkata. So both the western and eastern corridors, the freight corridors, are funded with Japanese loans. The TMIC corridor coming up along the DFC corridor is also funded by Japan. It's an industrial corridor, right? It consists of a road link along with the railway line, the freight line, which is passing parallelly, with industrial clusters coming up all along this industrial belt. Similar industrial belts have been planned between Bengaluru and Chennai, the Bengaluru-Chennai industrial corridor, Bengaluru-Mumbai industrial corridor, and many others. So Japan is very eager to fund these proposed projects as well. It is also playing a key role in funding high-speed rail connectivity in India. The first bullet train project of India between Ahmedabad and Mumbai, which is coming up, is also funded with Japanese concessional loans. As you know, Japan is a leader in high-speed rail technology. And Shinkansen, which is the popular bullet train network of Japan, the high-speed train network of Japan, it's known for its speed, punctuality, and effective connectivity it offers. So Japan is sharing the Shinkansen technology with India, helping India to set up high-speed rail networks, beginning with the Ahmedabad-Mumbai bullet train project. It has brought a lot of FDI as well, apart from the loans, and it has become one of the top investors in the Indian economy. Several Japanese companies, they have a major manufacturing presence in India, from Sony to Mitsubishi to Toyota, right, Toshiba, and many, many others. These are just the popular ones. Japanese companies have major investments in India with very large manufacturing facilities. We have a very strong economic relationship. Japan also has brought investments into Northeast India, as I was mentioning, in Assam, in Arunachal Pradesh, in Mizoram, Nagaland. Many development projects are funded by Japan. Road projects, rural development projects, even some power projects are being sponsored by Japan in the Northeast region. So this marks the success of our Look East Act East policy. One goal of Look East Act East was to drive investments in the Northeast from these countries. So Japan is becoming a major player in Northeast India to create infrastructure and improve connectivity so that growth opportunities are provided in Northeast India. So this largely explains the kind of economic relations we have built, right? But the relationship has suffered few ups and downs in the past. During the Cold War and after the Cold War, there were few ups and downs. We weren't as close as we are today because of the Cold War divide. As Japan was aligned with US and as US was hostile to India during the Cold War, obviously Japan also maintained its distance from 1950s to 1990s. But after the Cold War, close relations had started, but it was disrupted by the nuclear test of India in 1998, when India carried out the Pokhran test. Right? Japan was heavily critical. It criticized India for testing nuclear weapons, as we are not signatories to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Right? India has committed to not sign the NPT ever, and I've explained why. Because NPT is discriminatory. It only allows the P5 countries to retain their nuclear weapons while forcing other countries to give up their pursuit of nuclear weapons. So if India signs NPT, it essentially means you have to shut down your nuclear program. Right? So from the beginning, from 1967, when NPT was brought up, since then we have strongly opposed it. We have committed that we will never ever sign NPT because we want to retain the option of developing and possessing nuclear weapons for strategic reasons. So initially, Japan was critical. It criticized India's nuclear test and joined US and Western countries and China in imposing economic and technological sanctions against India. So as a result, our ties were affected for a few years. Is that clear? Japan joined hands with US, China, and others who were critical of our nuclear tests because India was seen as a rogue state, a country which had violated international law and tested weapons against the Non-Proliferation Treaty and against the CTBT, the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. India has said we will never sign CTBT as well. Because if you sign this treaty, you cannot test nuclear weapons. It bans any kind of testing. This is again discriminatory for us because others have already tested their nuclear weapons. The P5 countries, the official nuclear weapon states, according to Non-Proliferation Treaty, they've all tested their nuclear weapons and possessed nuclear weapons, which is a direct threat for India, especially the Chinese nuclear weapons are a threat to India. So we have said we'll never sign NPT and CTBT, and Japan was not happy with it. As Japan has a strong commitment to these treaties and non-proliferation, it was critical of India and joined all these countries to criticize India and impose economic technological sanctions on India. So after a brief period of disruption in the ties, very quickly the relationship was reset following the visit of Japanese Prime Minister Mori Yoshiro. Mori Yoshiro and Prime Minister Vajpayee started rebuilding the relationship because by early 2000, the rise of China became a concern for both India and Japan. It is primarily China and its aggressive rise which has brought us together again. Is that clear? Along with our economic ties, it is China's rise and aggression which has brought India-Japan closer. So in 2000, the relationship was reset. The issues related to nuclear weapons was forgotten and kept aside, and Japan even lifted all the sanctions within a few years. Because by 2004, we signed a nuclear deal with US itself. Right? Our ties with US started improving from 2001 after 9/11 attacks. And within 3 years, by 2004, we had signed the historic Indo-US nuclear deal. So as US gave recognition to our nuclear program and started lifting the sanctions, Japan also reset the relationship and lifted all the sanctions against India. So from here onwards, a close economic strategic partnership started forming. And to drive this economic relationship, we signed a free trade agreement. We signed an FTA called the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. Any FTA is designed to reduce your trade barriers. For any trade relationship between two countries, there will be two types of barriers that exist. One is your tariff-related barriers. That is the barriers caused by taxation. The import duties, custom duties, anti-dumping duties, countervailing duties. You have studied all these different taxes which are imposed on imports. These tariffs, if they are high, they act as a barrier against trade. It limits the trade opportunities. Then you have non-tariff barriers, which we studied under Bangladesh. These are barriers related to other issues, to non-tax related issues, like lack of connectivity, lack of infrastructure, your visa immigration policies, right? Then the various laws and regulations you have. So they form your non-tariff barriers. So any free trade agreement is generally designed to reduce these barriers to trade, to reduce the tariff barriers and non-tariff barriers. So in FTA, both the sides will reduce the taxes, the import duties. They'll almost bring it to zero. They provide almost duty-free access, zero duty access. They'll address the non-tariff issues as well by providing for better connectivity, better border infrastructure and trade infrastructure. They'll relax the visa immigration policies, so more students, workers, and businessmen and professionals can move between the two sides. They'll also synchronize some of their laws and policies and regulations to make it easier for the industries and exporters and importers to operate. So FTAs provide for free movement. They're designed to provide for free movement of goods, services, investments, and in some cases, even free movement of people. All right, that's what a free trade agreement deals with. So we struck a free trade agreement to further improve our economic ties. And in 2014, we have elevated the relationship to special strategic global partnership. Strategic ties have been established with focus on defense and security. Prior to this, in 2007, as I was mentioning earlier, we had invited Japan to the Malabar exercise. India had invited Japan to the Malabar naval exercise, which otherwise was a bilateral exercise between India and US. So along with Japan, even Australia, Singapore were invited. But China saw this as a military club designed to contain Chinese influence. So to retaliate against India, put pressure on India to not hold these exercises. So following the Chinese retaliation, we stopped inviting Japan, Australia, and Singapore and returned Malabar exercise back to the bilateral format for a few years. So this is how our relations started building up. And by 2011, we had a free trade agreement in place. And by 2014, we had elevated the relations to strategic partnership level. In the same year, Japan committed around $35 billion in investments and loans to drive India's economic development. All right, it committed $35 billion as part of concessional loans and FDI, which would drive key projects in India. And finally, in 2015, after China kept threatening India and Japan repeatedly, right, it escalated the border tensions with India. We have studied how China started increasing border incursions post 2010 as India got closer to US, right? As our defense security ties improved with the United States, China started retaliating against India and it started carrying out more frequent border incursions. It started violating all the boundary agreements we have. So India was very uncomfortable with Chinese military aggression, and the same was being experienced by Japan as well. In the East China Sea, China was acting very aggressively over the Senkaku Diaoyu Island dispute. Right, I showed you where this island is located as well when we studied South China Sea, East China Sea disputes. So Japan started facing threats. Chinese Navy and Air Force, the PLA Navy and Air Force, they would deliberately intercept Japanese vessels and aircraft and thus threaten freedom of navigation and overflight in the Indo-Pacific. So this is what brought India-Japan closer, and we invited Japan back into Malabar exercise. We brought Japan back into Malabar, and since then it has become a permanent participant in the Malabar naval exercise. Understood? So please make a note of this. It's very, very important. We had invited once before, but because of Chinese retaliation, we had stopped inviting other countries. It was returned back to bilateral exercises between India and US. But now that China was acting aggressively against both, it was natural for India-Japan to come together, and Japan was re-invited back into Malabar naval exercises. Is that clear? So it was during this period from early 2000 to 2015 that Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, a very, very good friend of India, he was recently assassinated, unfortunately, right? It was Shinzo Abe who gave a call for free and open Indo-Pacific. He kept promoting this idea throughout his term. From early 2000 all the way to 2015, he kept promoting the idea of a free and open Indo-Pacific. Basically, he was asking for UN clause provisions to be followed. He was urging for upholding the rules-based order, the international order, under international laws. And he was taking a stand against Chinese aggression with regard to maritime disputes. So this is what laid the foundation for like-minded countries to come together to protect UN clause, uphold the need for free and open Indo-Pacific. Right? This became the basis for forming the Quad grouping later. It was Shinzo Abe who suggested the idea of bringing the four like-minded democracies under the so-called Asian Security Diamond. This was the informal name that had been coined several years ago, which referred to a democratic alliance between India, US, Japan, and Australia. As Shinzo Abe kept talking about free and open Indo-Pacific, he urged like-minded countries to uphold UN clause and rules-based international order to protect freedom of navigation and overflight. So this laid the idea for bringing the four democracies together, which shared similar concerns. And informally, this was being referred to as Asian Security Diamond back then. Later, this was given a different shape called the Quad or the Quadrilateral. Is that clear? So based on this strategic partnership, which was forming, we have started holding multiple military exercises today. We have many military exercises with Japan: Dharma Guardian, Shinyu Maitri, Veer Guardian, JIMEX. These are the various exercises we have with our respective armed forces and self-defense forces. Basically, the Indian Army, Navy, and Air Force, they participate in these exercises with the self-defense forces of Japan. All right. But the biggest development came in 2016 when Japan agreed to sign a civil nuclear deal with India. Now, this was historic. Imagine for a country like Japan, which has given up nuclear weapons, which is the only victim of nuclear war, which has such a strong commitment to non-proliferation treaty and comprehensive test ban treaty, to sign this deal with India when India has not signed these treaties. This was a massive step. It showed the trust that had formed in the relationship. It was also a result of India-US nuclear deal, where the US had promised an NSG exemption for India, where US had promised to support and help India to gain membership to export control regimes such as Nuclear Suppliers Group without signing NPT or CTBT. So US was also playing a role in influencing other countries to support India to join NSG without signing NPT. Because signing NPT is a precondition. To become eligible to join NSG as a member, to engage in nuclear commerce through Nuclear Suppliers Group, you have to sign NPT. It's a mandatory condition. But US agreed for an exemption for India by recognizing our responsible nuclear program. Because India also has a strong commitment for non-proliferation. We have never leaked nuclear secrets and material. Our nuclear program has been very safe and secure, and we are not responsible for any cases of nuclear proliferation. So the US recognized this and gave an exemption to India and agreed to support India to enter export control regimes such as the NSG. So a few years later, Japan would also recognize India's nuclear program. It would see that India has a responsible nuclear program with a clean track record, and it supported India's entry into NSG and signed a civil nuclear deal with India. Now, this is quite historic because Japan is a leader in the civilian nuclear domain. In the civilian nuclear domain, Japan has been a global leader. So India can access nuclear technology and material from Japan with the help of the nuclear deal. So today, all these countries are supporting our entry to NSG. But as we studied, it is only China which is blocking our entry. China is the only NSG member blocking India's entry into the club. Is it clear? So can you understand the significance of this? There might be a 10 marks question where UPSC might ask you to illustrate the importance of India-Japan nuclear relations. So you have to talk about the entire background from Hiroshima and Nagasaki to Japan's commitment to non-proliferation treaty, its opposition to India's nuclear weapons and nuclear testing, how it affected the ties, how Japan also imposed sanctions on India, and then how it has been reset. That shows the complete turnaround and transformation in the relationship. Right? It shows the trust that exists today. It shows the strategic partnership which has formed today. In 2017, we even launched Asia-Africa Growth Corridor, which I was mentioning under India-Sri Lanka. And this is seen as a counter to China's Belt and Road Initiative. If China has Belt and Road Initiative, India-Japan have launched Asia-Africa Growth Corridor to fund infrastructure projects, connectivity projects across Asian and African countries. Is that clear? They're looking to take up joint projects where they will fund these initiatives and execute them together. We even established a 2+2 ministerial dialogue in 2019, which allows our foreign ministers and defense ministers to engage in a simultaneous discussion to talk about important foreign policy and security issues. That's what a 2+2 dialogue means. Countries which are very close to each other, which have very close defense relations and foreign relations, they often establish this format of diplomatic dialogue called 2+2 dialogue. So 2+2 dialogue can be at the level of officials as well, between government officials from foreign ministry and defense ministry. Like for example, foreign defense secretaries of India will meet with the counterparts of the other country. Even that is a 2+2 dialogue, but at the official level. But this can be elevated to the ministerial level, where cabinet ministers, at the level of foreign and defense ministers, they meet simultaneously. So all the four ministers, so foreign defense ministers from India and Japan, they meet together to discuss the key foreign policy security issues to align their policies and strategies together. So such an important dialogue has been set up, the 2+2 ministerial dialogue. And last year, when Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida visited India, he has announced another commitment of $42 billion worth of investments to India in the coming decade. This clearly shows that Japan is one of the biggest investors in India. Japanese loans and funds are critical for infrastructure projects in the country, and parallelly we have built a very strong defense military relations and a strategic partnership to counter China. Today we are considering procuring military equipment as well. Defense trade in defense technology is being considered, and India is interested in procuring the amphibious Shinmaiwa US-2 aircraft for the Indian Navy and the Coast Guard. This is a proposal which is present to enable the mobility of the Navy and the Coast Guard. We are looking to procure the advanced amphibious aircraft, the US-2 Shinmaiwa, which is a Japanese aircraft. All right, amphibious aircraft, they can land in water, take off in water. So it enables maritime forces like the Navy and Coast Guard to strengthen maritime security. It plays a critical role in maritime security. So we are considering to procure the Shinmaiwa US-2 aircraft, and you can see a complete alignment between our Act East policy and the free and open Indo-Pacific vision of Japan. There's a direct alignment that you find here. It's these common concerns and issues and factors that bring us together. Our Act East approach, our Indo-Pacific vision, aligns with Japan's vision of a free and open Indo-Pacific. Right? So this is the basis of the quadrilateral. In fact, if you look at the history of the Quad, it goes all the way back to 2004 tsunami, the Indian Ocean tsunami. It was during the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, for the first time, these four navies came together to provide disaster management assistance. India, US, Japan, and Australia, through their navies, they cooperated with each other to provide HADR assistance to the affected countries. Following this, Japanese PM Shinzo Abe, he suggested the idea of an Asian Security Diamond, which would be a coalition of four democracies in Indo-Pacific to stabilize the Indo-Pacific and counter the Chinese aggression. For many years, this idea did not get support, right? Because India was very hesitant. India was concerned about instigating China. But as China got more and more aggressive, kept triggering border tensions with India, India was pushed into a corner by 2015. So after 2015, we ignored Chinese concerns, went ahead and invited Japan back into Malabar exercise. And finally, the Quad grouping was also formed by 2016. It's an informal diplomatic grouping, and its main focus is on promoting rules-based order and upholding UN Convention on Law of the Sea that provides for freedom of navigation and overflight in the Indo-Pacific. Is that clear? Later, we have invited Australia as well. Now, Australia also has been brought back under Malabar exercise. So the Quad countries, that is India, US, Japan, and Australia, they are working together to stabilize the Indo-Pacific, which essentially means they are trying to counter the Chinese aggression, the military aggression, the diplomatic aggression China is showing with regard to maritime disputes and land border disputes. But however, Quad also is a challenge for India because US, Japan, and Australia, they wanted to give Quad a military angle. They were very interested to turn this into a military alliance, a military club, something like NATO. That's why China refers to Quad as Asian NATO. China is firmly opposed to the Quad grouping. It sees Quad as a military strategy to contain China and limit Chinese influence. That's why it counters the Quad and calls it Asian NATO. So these other members of Quad, they wanted Quad to become like a military alliance or military club. Because anyways, the Quad countries had the Malabar exercise, where even Australia was brought back in 2020, which meant they already had a military exercise going on between their navies. But it was India which put its foot down. India rejected the militarization of Quad. India rejected the idea of giving a military angle to the Quad for two reasons. One, because of principle of strategic autonomy. Our foreign policy, as you know, is rooted on the principle of strategic autonomy. We maintain independent foreign policy, which means we have never joined any kind of military alliances. In our entire independent history, we have never joined any military club. Even when we aligned with Soviet Union, we never joined any military grouping or any military alliance. This is against India's belief. The moment you join a military club like this, your options become restricted, you become constrained to the group, and you cannot exercise your independent foreign policy anymore. You will lose your strategic autonomy. India knows very well that we need other countries as much as we need Western countries. We need Russia as much as we need US, right? We need many other countries which are opposed to the West as much as we need these Western powers. So joining any such military club limits our options. It restricts our options. So that is why India was not at all interested in giving the military approach to the Quad grouping. even though it was pushed by US, Japan, and Australia, right, we firmly stayed away from it. We put our foot down and we said, our principle of strategic autonomy does not allow us to militarize the Quad. We can't be part of any military clubs or groupings. So that's why Quad remains a diplomatic grouping. The second reason why India didn't want to militarize Quad is because we don't want to trigger China. We don't want to unnecessarily provoke or instigate China, because at the end of the day, we will bear the consequences, not the others. US, Japan, Australia don't share land borders with China, but India does. That to a disputed border. If China wants, it can retaliate against India and punish India as well. And we know that very well. It's important to acknowledge and realize that China is a superior power to India. We're not undermining India. Please understand what I'm saying. The government also acknowledges this. India is a formidable power. We are a formidable economy and a military power. But China is a much more superior economic and military power than India. It can inflict severe damage on India compared to what India can do to China in a worst case scenario. So given that India has a disadvantage, we are a weaker power relatively, it is important to not provoke, to not instigate unnecessarily. This is where India draws the line. We need Western countries to help us to improve our defense preparedness, to provide us with better defense technology so that we can stand up to China. But we don't want to join any military clubs or alliances, form these groups, gang up against China. Because that will be perceived in a very different way, and China will directly retaliate against India and put more pressure on India. China is already reacting. It's already putting more pressure on India just because we've gotten closer to US and Western countries. Now imagine if Quad becomes a military club. China will not hesitate even to trigger a conflict with India. This is where India drew the line. We said we have never joined military clubs, we'll never join military alliances, right? That violates our principle of strategic autonomy. It will constrain our foreign policy options, and our foreign policy will not be independent anymore. And along with that, we didn't want any triggers, because the impact will be felt only by India, and these countries may not come to the direct help of India. If ever there's an India-China conflict, none of these countries will come to the direct help of India. They might give weapon support, intelligence support, etc. Right? They might criticize China, but they will not take on China directly on India's behalf. That will never happen. So India realizes this very well. So this is where we drew the line. All right. So Quad remains a diplomatic grouping and not a military grouping. So instead, we have diversified the Quad, and today it is focusing on many other issues as well. It's not just restricted to enforcing UN clause and upholding rules-based international order. Quad has gone beyond this. Today it is focused on critical emerging technologies, in improving supply chains, in creating parallel supply chains. It's focused on vaccine development and strategies to combat pandemics. It's also focused on many other issues, including climate change, which affects the Indo-Pacific. So many new dimensions have been added to the Quad grouping, as a result of which it has become a diversified diplomatic grouping. It definitely helps India to put pressure on China, to counter China, but within limits, without escalating, without leading to military tensions. We can use the diplomatic platform to get help from US, Japan, and Australia to uphold UN clause and rules-based international order in the Indo-Pacific. Along with that, we are collaborating in other areas, and as a result, Quad has become a vital grouping for India without crossing the red line, without affecting our independent foreign policy, without instigating China. And that is the balance that India has struck. Is that clear? Now, this is India's policy of multi-alignment. This is the true display of our policy of multi-alignment, meaning we will align with any country who will serve our interests. During Cold War, we were non-aligned. We were pushing non-alignment. But non-alignment is outdated. NAM is an outdated concept today. We moved away from non-alignment many, many years ago. In fact, the moment Indira Gandhi sought Soviet Union's help in 1971, from there itself, we started moving away from non-alignment. Especially after 1991, after Cold War ended, we have largely moved away from non-alignment. That's why we don't pay much importance to the NAM movement. We don't even attend NAM meetings many times. Today, in the last 30 years, our focus is multi-alignment. We will align with any country, any power. Even if it's Pakistan, even if it's China, if they can serve our interests, our national interests, we will align with them. We will work with them. That is how we balance different conflicting powers. We'll work with China as well, we'll work with US as well. We'll work with Russia as well, we'll work with US and European countries as well. They might have enmities, they might have rivalries and conflicts. That is not our concern. Our concern is our national interests. So that is the balance we strike through our multi-alignment approach, and that is how we are a member of Quad grouping. At the same time, we are a member of SCO, BRICS, and other such groupings as well. Understood? So Japan is a key member of the Quad, and it's important to know what exactly is this grouping and how India has been using the platform. Is that clear? The last point, India and Japan are pushing for reforms of UN through an informal group called the G4. They're pushing for a permanent seat at UN Security Council. We have rejected the outdated structure of the UN, and as new powers have emerged across the world, we have formed an alliance with 4 like-minded countries from different continents. And we have formed this group called the G4. It's an informal group at the UN, pushing for reforms of UN and demanding a permanent seat at UNSC. The G4 includes India, Japan, Brazil, and Germany. These are the G4 countries, the major powers from Asia, Europe, and Latin America. Right? They have emerged as major powers in geopolitics today, and they're demanding a permanent seat, pushing for UN reforms through an informal group called G4. All right? But they are facing opposition from a rival group called the Coffee Club. There is another informal group at UN called Coffee Club, which is opposing the permanent seat for G4 countries. This Coffee Club is mainly made up of regional rivals of these G4 countries, like Pakistan for India, South Korea for Japan. Even though South Korea is a friend and ally, it doesn't want Japan to become a permanent member. That will undermine South Korean influence. Similarly, Argentina for Brazil. Right? If Brazil becomes the representative from South America as a permanent member, Argentina would be undermined. Italy from Europe is opposing Germany's entry. Right? It will undermine Italy's role because UK, France are already permanent members. If Germany also becomes a permanent member, Italy will be sidelined. So many of these regional rivals and other countries who are against UN reforms or against permanent seat to these 4 countries, they have formed a counter group, an opposition informal group called Coffee Club. So at UNSC, you see this conflict between G4 and Coffee Club. So India, along with Japan, Brazil, Germany, is pushing for a permanent seat and the reforms of the UN, but Coffee Club countries are opposing it. So this covers the entire spectrum of India-Japan relations. If you can understand all these key points and understand the analysis that I have provided, right, this covers the whole topic. It will give you enough material to answer any question that might come on this topic. Is that clear? Don't neglect Japan at any cost. It's a very, very important country. So if this is clear, let's move on to the next country, India and Vietnam. It's a smaller topic. We'll complete this, and then we will take a look at all the important groupings and organizations from Southeast Asia and East Asia. So if you look at India-Vietnam relations, today it's a very special strategic relationship, but in the past there has been complexities involved. For example, During the Cold War, Vietnam got divided. The Vietnam War broke out, which was a direct result of Cold War rivalries, and it was essentially a proxy war involving the communist powers, the Soviet Union and China, which supported North Vietnam and the Communist Party of Vietnam, and the United States, representing the Democratic Power Bloc, which backed democratic forces in South Vietnam. Immediately after the Second World War, the Cold War rivalries had begun, where Western Democratic Power Bloc led by US was engaged in a direct geopolitical rivalry with the Communist Power Bloc, the Eastern Power Bloc led by the Soviets. This led to their proxy wars in every single country, from Central America to South America to West Asia, right, to the Korean Peninsula, to Vietnam, to India. In every part of the world, a covert proxy war broke out between US and the Soviet Union. This Cold War, where they were pushing their ideologies, the Eastern Soviet Bloc was pushing communism and socialism. The Western Bloc led by US and West European countries were pushing democracy and capitalism. This broke Vietnam into two, North and South Vietnam. The Communist Party of Vietnam led a revolutionary war with the support of Soviet and Chinese government. They would directly fund and arm North Vietnam's communist forces, triggering a conflict with the pro-democratic South Vietnamese forces, which were backed by the US. This conflict led to the direct military intervention of the US. As always, US is known for carrying out disastrous military interventions, and this was one of the initial disasters committed by the US. The US directly entered conflict back in South Vietnam, and it committed brutal atrocities in this conflict. The US is accused of using chemical weapons, including Agent Orange or nerve gas, which today is a banned chemical weapon. Right? It carried out brutal military assaults, and it has led to large-scale human rights violations in Vietnam. But eventually, the communist forces won the war. The communist forces, with support from Soviet Union and China, they managed to fight back the South Vietnamese pro-democratic forces and the US military, and throughout the US military occupation. After more than a decade of war, after spending billions of dollars, losing thousands of soldiers, the US was frustrated with the conflict with no end, no results. And finally, it quit the country. It retreated. Just like it exited Afghanistan, right? It left Vietnam and ran back. So this led North Vietnam to emerge victorious. The Communist Party won and reunified Vietnam. The pro-democracy movement was defeated, right? And Vietnam was reunified to form the current country that you have. So during this US military intervention and the conflict, India stood by Vietnam against any such military interventions. India opposed such unilateral military interventions. This was an ideological commitment of India during the non-aligned movement, which we were championing during the Cold War divide. This is where NAM becomes very crucial. See, many ridicule non-alignment. They dismiss and criticize non-alignment. But they are short-sighted. Those people are short-sighted because during this critical period from 1947 to 1970s, when the world was divided between ideologies and power blocks, it was India which championed a neutral third ideology. Being non-aligned doesn't mean you're not acting. It means you're making a choice, a decision not to align with these rival powers and add to the enmity and tensions. Rather, we were championing a neutral middle path, and that takes a lot of courage to do. So India became the leader at that point, using non-alignment as a strategy to strike balance between these power blocks. So we opposed any such unilateral military intervention, and that was our position regarding the Vietnam conflict. But by 1970s, by 1975, the Vietnam War ended, with the Communist Party capturing control, and it reunified Vietnam, and since then Vietnam became a single-party communist state, just like China. Even today, Vietnam is a communist country, ruled by a single party, the Communist Party. Is that clear? But it is entirely different from how China is today. China is authoritarian, there are no basic fundamental rights, it is very aggressive against neighbors, but Vietnam is not like that. Vietnam is the opposite of it. Vietnam is a thriving economy today. I don't know if you know this. Vietnam is one of the fastest growing countries in the world. It has become a technology hub, a research and innovation hub. Just like India is an IT hub and a startup hub, Vietnam also is an IT and startup hub today. There's a lot of collaboration happening between Indian and Vietnamese companies and startups, right? So that is the kind of transformation Vietnam has seen. But Vietnam also has faced a lot of challenges in the past. After reunifying, it faced many challenges. Because obviously on one hand, we are aligned with Soviet Union. Because of the American threat against India during 1971 war, we are clearly aligned with the Soviet Union. We had abandoned non-alignment, signed a treaty of peace and friendship with the Soviet Union, and became a close partner to the Soviet Union. We even started procuring arms and weapons and military equipment from Soviet Union. That's how we modernized our armed forces. The same happened with Vietnam. As the Communist Party came to power, it obviously aligned with Soviet Union during the Cold War and started procuring arms and weapons from Soviet Union. So this led India and Vietnam to come closer, as we were both good friends of Soviet Union, procuring same military platforms. Right? It created an alignment between India and Vietnam. But what really brought India and Vietnam together is their common concern about Chinese aggression. Just like China has threatened India, increased border tensions, disputed our border, and even attacked India, fought a war against India. Similarly, China has done the same with Vietnam. In 1979, it attacked Vietnam over a land boundary issue. They have fought a brief war, similar to our 1962 conflict. So Vietnam has always seen China as a major threat, a strategic military threat. We have studied the maritime dispute that exists in South China Sea. Right? I've explained this in detail under India-China. So here as well, China has claimed Vietnam's territories and EEZ. The Spratly Islands, the Paracel group of islands, which would belong to Vietnam, are being claimed by China, and China is claiming the whole EEZ to itself. So because of these land boundary issue, the brief conflict, and later maritime dispute in South China Sea, a strategic alignment has developed between India and Vietnam. After the Cold War came to an end, we established very close economic ties in various sectors like agriculture, healthcare. We started making investments in both the countries. Many Indian companies operate here. Many Indian companies have big investments that have happened in the last 30 years. Our economic relations have really boomed and developed, from agriculture to science and technology to space cooperation, healthcare, IT, and research and development as well. In all these key sectors, there is close collaboration today between India and Vietnam. All right. So in 2007, they elevated the relationship to a strategic partnership level, and in 2016, recently, they have further elevated this to comprehensive strategic partnership. It basically signifies the growing strategic ties. You form strategic ties with close partners with whom you have a well-diversified relationship. Strategic partnership means the relationship is not limited to one or two areas. It's a very diversified relationship, from defense to technology, agriculture, economic cooperation, cultural ties, health and education. When you have such multiple sectors of cooperation, that's when we call it a strategic partnership. So countries which are very, very close to each other with a lot of focus on defense and security issues, they elevate their ties with strategic partnership agreements and comprehensive strategic partnership agreements. So today, India-Vietnam relations have truly diversified, and it's one of the strongest relations that we have in the region. Is that clear? So let's see what concern do they have with China and what kind of defense military relations and economic relations have developed. The biggest concern for both happens to be the Chinese aggression, both over their land border and also in the maritime domain in the Indo-Pacific. India faces rising Chinese influence in the Indian Ocean. Vietnam faces maritime threats in South China Sea over the South China Sea dispute. Right, along the Himalayan border and also along the China-Vietnam border, there are tensions created by China. And China is very aggressive. It does not hesitate to use military force to carry out incursions and threaten the other countries and even violate their sovereignty. This is something that brings us together. It's the history of clashes and conflict that we have with China that brings the two countries together, and naturally we have formed a strategic partnership designed to counter China. All right? Remember I told you one incident while talking about South China Sea. In 2012, India's OVL had been invited for oil exploration. Since Vietnam has hydrocarbon reserves in South China Sea, which is part of its exclusive economic zone. It's part of the Spratly Islands and Paracel Islands and the EEZ around it. It belongs to Vietnam, according to UN clause provisions. So in Vietnamese EEZ, Vietnam wanted to explore hydrocarbon resources and extract the resources as well. So it had invited India to participate in the joint exploration. Accordingly, our ONGC Limited, its foreign arm, which is OVL, ONGC Videsh Limited, had sent an oil exploration ship, which was escorted by the Indian Navy. These Indian ships were threatened by the Chinese Navy and intercepted, and they were asked to go back, as China claimed that to be Chinese waters. The PLA Navy intercepted the Indian vessels, threatened the Indian vessels to go back, saying that these are Chinese waters, these are Chinese EEZ. Now, this is a clear disruption of freedom of navigation. Freedom of navigation, as I've repeatedly told you, is a fundamental right under UN clause. That is the rules-based international order. But China is repeatedly violating it, and it does not hesitate to use military aggression to disrupt this right for others. This is what brings us together, India, Vietnam. This is why we come together, because we both have a geostrategic convergence. We have the same thought about Indo-Pacific. We want Indo-Pacific to remain free and open. We want freedom of navigation guaranteed under UN clause to be upheld at any cost. And we want to protect the rules-based international order. This is what drives our relationship. We have the same position on this issue, and we oppose Chinese military aggression in the maritime domain. Understood? So if you look at our defense ties, naturally it's very, very close. Not just because of China, but also because of our past ties with the Soviet Union and current relations with Russia. Because most of our military equipment, they're of Russian and Soviet origin. This is another common factor. Apart from the common concerns against China that we have, right? The other factor which brings us together in the defense domain is the common military equipment that we have. Just like India has Russian Kilo-class submarines, the so-called 30 fighter jets, even Vietnam has the same. Vietnam's Navy and its Air Force, they operate similar equipment. So this is where India is helping Vietnam. We are training their armed forces in operating the Russian and Soviet equipment. Indian Navy and Indian Air Force, they provide military training to Vietnamese forces in operating Russian and Soviet equipment. We also help them in repairing, servicing, and in providing spare parts to the Russian military platforms. Because India has created an indigenous infrastructure for that. We produce a lot of spare components indigenously to service and repair the Russian Soviet equipment. So this is something we share with Vietnam. We have even given a loan, a concessional loan for this, of around $500 million. India has given a line of credit of $500 million, through which Vietnam can procure defense equipment from India, especially spare parts and components, to upgrade Russian and Soviet defense platforms. Apart from that, we have brought out a joint vision statement recently called India-Vietnam Defense Partnership towards 2030. It was signed last year. It shows that we have a long-term vision, and we are looking to further step up the defense partnership in the coming decade. We are part of many joint military exercises, especially naval exercises like MILAN. Indian Navy organizes the MILAN multinational naval exercise. Multiple countries are invited, from Singapore, Thailand, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, to Vietnam. Even Japan has been invited. Last year when we held MILAN exercise, even Japan took part in it for the first time. So Vietnam is a major participant in the MILAN exercise, which is a multinational exercise hosted by Indian Navy. We even have a bilateral naval exercise called WinBAX, Vietnam-India Naval Bilateral Exercise. And recently we have gifted a naval ship to Vietnam. Does anyone know the name of this naval vessel which India has gifted to Vietnam? It's a very recent development. Just a few weeks ago, just a few weeks back, it was widely reported in newspapers. It was shown as a mark of growing defense relations between India and Vietnam. Kostum and Janvi have given the correct answer. Very good. It is INS Kirpan. This naval vessel has been given by India to Vietnam. It signifies our growing defense relations, especially in the naval and maritime domain. There is also a proposal for selling the BrahMos cruise missiles to Vietnam, and the talks are going on. Now, this will be a strategic development, a very, very big development. For many years, Vietnam has shown interest to procure the BrahMos. As you know, BrahMos is a joint venture between India and Russia, and it's one of the most advanced, fastest, and most accurate cruise missiles in the world. It can be used for precision strikes, right? And there are multiple variants of the BrahMos. You can fire this from land, you can fire this from the sea, and also from the air. It can be very useful to target terror camps which are hidden behind forests and mountains. It can be very useful to target precise enemy locations. It can be used even to target ships, right? Any surface targets. So BrahMos is a very versatile weapon jointly developed by India and Russia. So Vietnam has been showing interest for many years, and today the talks are going on. In the last few months, talks have accelerated to sell BrahMos from India to Vietnam. This will strengthen Vietnam's response against Chinese military aggression, especially in South China Sea. Right now, Chinese Navy is blatantly threatening Vietnam. With BrahMos, Vietnam can easily counter China and deter China as well. But however, India is a little hesitant. selling BrahMos would be an escalation from the Indian side. Some are arguing that if China can arm Pakistan and use Pakistan as a proxy against India, some are arguing that India should do the same. That we should arm Vietnam, give them even more military support, provide them BrahMos and other key platforms so they can counter China. But there is a hesitation on the Indian side that if we take up this step, if we sell BrahMos to Vietnam, that could be seen as a major escalation by China. China might retaliate, might put more pressure on India. So that's why the talks are going on, but it's been delayed. This proposal was made many years ago, actually. It's been delayed, it's a pending issue, but definitely the talks are going on and it might be finalized, you never know. India might agree to this and we might export BrahMos to Vietnam. Understood? Now, do you know, recently we have signed a deal to export BrahMos to another country, another Southeast Asian country. Do you know which country it is? Last year, we signed a historic deal to export BrahMos to a Southeast Asian country. Very good. Most of you are getting the right answer. It is Philippines. Philippines also has maritime disputes in South China Sea. We saw the Scarborough Shoal, Macclesfield Bank, and New Mischief Reef. I showed you all those locations, these small islands in South China Sea, which actually belongs to Philippines, but China is claiming them. China threatens Philippines and targets Philippines as well with military aggression. Right? Philippines had approached Permanent Court of Arbitration, filed a case against China, PCA. PCA ruled in favor of Philippines and ordered China to respect UN clause. But still, China has ignored the PCA award and it continues to threaten Philippines and act against Philippines. So, India selling BrahMos to Philippines is a major step. The deal has been signed and we are going to export in the near future. We're going to send BrahMos missiles, the cruise missiles to Philippines. So now that India has signed a deal with Philippines, it might become easier to sell the BrahMos missiles to Vietnam as well. So this is something you should watch out for. It's a very, very big development. It shows India's increasing military profile in the South China Sea. Right? It is India's way of countering China in a way. Just like China, arms Pakistan, uses other countries in South Asia and Indian Ocean to counter India and to contain India. So this is the special relationship that we share, and you see this in the space domain as well. There is very close collaboration in the space sector. ISRO is looking to set up a satellite tracking imaging center. Because to track our rocket launches and satellite launches, we need a global network of tracking stations. Right? We already have few such tracking stations. We have one in Mauritius. We have one in Brunei, one in Indonesia. ISRO has already set up these tracking stations in foreign countries to track the launches from Sriharikota and even to maintain contact with the satellites in orbit, to control their operations, right? To raise and lower their orbits, to receive data from them. You need a global network of stations to track satellites and maintain communication with them. So these are stations which we have already set up. We are looking at Bhutan as well. There's a proposal to set up a station like this with Bhutan. And there's a proposal to set up a satellite tracking imaging center in Vietnam as well. Is that clear? So this will be mutually beneficial because it will not only help ISRO to set up a tracking station and better monitor the launches and control satellites in orbit, it could also help Vietnam and it could be given a military angle if required. Since it will consist of an imaging center as well, which can receive imaging data from our Earth observation satellites. They're essentially spy satellites, military satellites. You would have heard of RISAT, Cartosat, and many others. These advanced Earth observation satellites of India, they play a critical role in spying on the enemy, in monitoring enemy movement, in border surveillance, right? In monitoring enemy troop deployment. So if India shares the imagery with Vietnam, it would help Vietnam to monitor Chinese military deployment along the land border and also in South China Sea. Is that clear? This is a proposal. So in return for allowing ISRO to set up a tracking station, we are promising that imagery support, imagery intelligence will be provided. All right, imagery intelligence is crucial, which is generated from Earth observation satellites. It's crucial in monitoring border areas to check, border infiltration, to tackle organized crime, and even to monitor enemy movement and deployment. So this is the kind of space and defense cooperation that we have built. And we also have very close economic ties, as I was mentioning. So today, Vietnam is one of the fastest growing economies, and we do have a significant trading relationship. There are many Indian workers working in Vietnam. There are Vietnamese companies and startups in India, right? Indian companies have big investments as well. So the trade and economic partnership is growing. IT sector, startups, research, development, innovation, these are becoming the focus areas, apart from other areas like agriculture, pharmaceuticals, and others. Like during COVID-19, we supplied essential medical items through Mission Sagar. Vietnam was one of the beneficiaries of Mission Sagar. We gave essential supplies to Vietnam as well during COVID-19. We have supplied vaccines as well under vaccine diplomacy. India also is funding development projects. We provide concessional loans or line of credits for socio-economic welfare projects, either through ASEAN grouping or MGC grouping, where Vietnam is a member. To these regional groupings, like ASEAN and MGC, Mekong Ganga Cooperation, we are funding few development initiatives in Vietnam and the region around it to promote socio-economic welfare. So this is the special relationship that we share with this country. And trust me, this is another important topic. You might get a question. We have got a question in prelims on Vietnam. You might get a mains question as well. So please pay attention to it. Both these countries are very, very important from Southeast and East Asia. Now let's quickly look at the last point. Let's look at the regional groupings and organizations of Southeast and East Asia. This is very factual. This is more important for your prelims. So I'll take you through important groupings of the region. You should understand who are the members, when was it set up, what is its main role and functions, what equation does India have with it. Such basic facts are needed. First, you have ASEAN, which is central to Southeast Asia. It's also the central pillar of our Look East Act East policy. So it's a regional grouping. It's a political economic union of 10 Southeast Asian countries. As I told you, the 10 Southeast Asian countries, if you look at them individually, they are very small countries, small economies. They have their own individual strength. But when they come together collectively as a group, they become a formidable political, economic, and military organization. Because they have very close security ties as well. Is that clear? So it's a political, economic, and military grouping that brings these countries together. And now 11th member is going to join. Recently, they've approved the membership of another country, but it's going to take some time before it formally joins. Does anyone know which country is it? Which will be the 11th member of the ASEAN? Very good. East Timor. East Timor is the new member. It's been approved last year, but it's yet to take place. Because the process of joining will take time. There are several formalities to be fulfilled. Maybe in another 2 years, East Timor will formally become the 11th member of ASEAN. As of now, it has only 10 countries, the 10 Southeast Asian countries. It was established in 1967 through the ASEAN Declaration or Bangkok Declaration. Since then, it has formed a free trade area, providing for free movement of goods, services, investments. These countries have built close political, cultural ties, economic ties, and even close military defense relations as well. All right. So India's primary engagement with the region has been with ASEAN Group. When we launched our Look East policy in 1991, we put this into action in 1992 by establishing a sectoral dialogue with the ASEAN Group. India realized that there's no point in dealing with these countries individually. See, bilaterally as well, we have good ties with them. But instead of approaching them bilaterally, instead of dealing with each country separately, we focused on the entire group. ASEAN became the pillar, the central pillar of our Look East policy. Even today, ASEAN is the focus of our Act East policy. So we established a sectoral dialogue in 1992 and became a full dialogue partner with the ASEAN Regional Forum, which is a much larger grouping created by ASEAN countries. We will discuss ASEAN Regional Forum as well. I'll show you who are the members. ASEAN Regional Forum, or ARF, it is a much larger grouping created by ASEAN countries. ASEAN itself has established this larger group. So India became a member of ARF, gained the status of full dialogue partner, and in 2002, we decided to hold annual summits. 1 decade after Look East policy, 1 decade after setting up sectoral dialogue with ASEAN, we decided to set up annual summit level interaction. Meaning, at the highest level, at the level of prime ministers, presidents, every year an India-ASEAN summit will take place. Is that clear? After each year's ASEAN and East Asia summit, which take place together, one after the other, we will hold a India-ASEAN summit as well. We are invited every single year to participate in ASEAN Meet and East Asia Summit. We are a member of East Asia Summit as well. Following these meetings, which is a multilateral meeting, we hold a separate dialogue with ASEAN countries. Right? That's why Indian Prime Minister will travel and attend these summits. Just a few weeks ago, just 2 days before we held the G20 summit, the ASEAN East Asia Summit was held in Indonesia, and PM Modi traveled to Indonesia, even though G20 summit was about to begin in India. That shows the importance we attach to ASEAN and East Asia Summit. Right? So ASEAN is the primary focus of our Look East Act East policy, and we are also part of this larger group called ASEAN Regional Forum. This was established in 1994 by ASEAN countries to promote security cooperation and promote peaceful, stable relations in the region amongst all the members present in and around ASEAN countries. There are 27 members involved in this forum. That includes your 10 ASEAN countries who started this forum, 10 dialogue partners of ASEAN, that is Australia, Canada, China, European Union, India, Japan, New Zealand, South Korea, Russia, and US. These are the 10 dialogue partners of ASEAN. They have this status. All right? And other middle powers from the region, from South Asia, from East Asia, they've all been invited. Like Bangladesh, DPRK, that's your North Korea, Mongolia, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Timor-Leste, and one observer, Papua New Guinea, from the Pacific. All these countries are part of it, the ASEAN Regional Forum. It's seen as a security forum focusing on security issues and stabilizing the ASEAN region and the larger Indo-Pacific region. All right, so these are two important groups you have to remember, ASEAN and ASEAN Regional Forum. If you look at India-ASEAN relations, the biggest success we have seen under Look East Act East policy is the signing of the free trade agreement that I was mentioning. Right, we have signed the Comprehensive Economic Cooperation Agreement in 2003, based on which we worked out a trade agreement in goods, services, and investments. These negotiations took a few more years after the SECA was signed, and the first trade in goods agreement was signed in 2009, which has come into force from 2010. This provides free movement for goods between India and ASEAN. The idea is to promote exports of both the sides to boost the bilateral trade volume. A few years later, we signed the trade in services and investments in 2015, which has now provided for free movement of services and investments as well. So it's a very comprehensive free trade agreement that covers goods, services, and investments. All right, but however, the FTA has definitely boosted bilateral trade. It has increased Indian exports. It has helped our economy, definitely, there's no doubt. Our exports have gone up, creating more jobs in India, boosting production in India. Right? The bilateral trade volume has increased. So there are many positives from this FTA. But along with the positive developments, there are major concerns for India because we have had a bitter experience with this FTA. See, FTAs can be a double-edged sword. It can benefit, at the same time it can cause harm, it can cause damage. So India has had a bitter experience, and we feel that ASEAN countries, they ensured that they got more benefits from the deal than India. There are certain specific issues and concerns that we have. That's why we feel that we had a bitter experience with the FTA. And that's why for almost 10 plus years, we never signed another FTA. Until last year, India did not sign any trade agreement with any country. We even stopped these trade negotiations because of this bitter experience with ASEAN. One major concern India had was the flood of cheap imports from ASEAN market. There was a flood of cheap imports into India, which has affected several domestic industries. Because see, the tariffs are reduced and almost duty-free access is given in select commodities. And if this is not well negotiated with adequate protection for your domestic industry, it might lead to a flood of cheap imports into the country. So with this FTA, we have had this experience where, for example, the coconut industry in Kerala has taken a big hit because of cheaper coconut products coming from Thailand and Indonesia. The coffee industry in Karnataka has taken a hit because of cheaper coffee coming from Vietnam. Similarly, electronics, the limited electronics sector we have in the MSME sector has taken a hit because of cheaper products coming from Southeast Asian markets. So this is one impact where our farmers, our MSME industry has been affected. The second concern is that there is no rules of origin requirement under the deal. Now, what do you mean by this? It essentially refers to where the product is originating from. If a commodity is being exported to India under the FTA, or if India is exporting a commodity to ASEAN market under the FTA, it's important to establish where is this product coming from. Was it really manufactured, produced in these countries so that they can enjoy the benefits of FTA? So for that, you should have a rules of origin requirement where you can establish that at least this percentage of the product was made here in this country. See, today's globalized world, no product gets made in just one country. Most of the products, right, they go through the entire supply chains, they get spare parts from around the world, they go to assembly chains around the world, and that's how you get your finished product. But under FTA, you need at least a certain percentage of domestic value addition to be made to ensure that only those countries who are part of FTA can enjoy the benefits. Now, problem is if you don't have a rules of origin requirement, third parties might exploit the FTA. Traders, exporters from other countries, especially from China, they have misused India-ASEAN FTA route to dump goods on the Indian market. China is not supposed to enjoy these benefits. This is only for India and ASEAN. But since there's no rules of origin requirement, which mandates minimum value addition, Chinese products are being pushed into Southeast Asia and then re-exported to India under the FTA route, under the reduced duty route. We studied under India-China how China dumps goods on India, and we have levied taxes, anti-dumping duties to block Chinese goods into the Indian market. To protect our domestic industry, right, we have created trade barriers with China. But Chinese traders are bypassing this. They're easily bypassing the trade measures we have against China by coming from Southeast Asian route. They send the products to Southeast Asia, make some basic changes, and re-export that to India. So they're taking the benefit of this FTA, which harms our domestic industry. This is a concern which was not met. And the other problem is there is no review mechanism after a period of time. No dispute settlement if you have disputes or issues. There's no platform to settle them under the FTA. So this has been a concern for India. That's why we feel we should have negotiated the deal better. ASEAN countries which were more formidable together, they pushed India, they struck a better deal, right? And once it was implemented, then India realized the drawbacks. So because of this bad experience, we did not sign FTAs for almost 10 years. We moved away from even FTA talks and stopped all FTA negotiations. It's only last year that we have signed trade agreements again. Understood? So this is one bitter experience we've had, but definitely it has boosted trade. It has increased exports for both. It has contributed to closer relations. But these are the concerns we have. The flood of cheap imports affecting our industries. No rules of origin, because of which third parties are misusing it to dump goods on India. And no review option and no dispute settlement platform. All right. So this is where I would like to stop my discussion for today. Let's pick it up tomorrow. We have just a few small topics left. We'll wrap it up and we will be looking at Central Asia and West Asia in the coming classes. So let's quickly take a look at the questions and doubts that you have. Amandeep is asking why IORA did not admit Pakistan, saying it has not given MFN status to India. See, one condition to be part of IORA or any such regional grouping is that you have to follow certain basic global norms and standards. Under WTO, countries have to provide MFN status to each other, the most favored nation status. Basically, by providing MFN status, you're saying that you're not going to discriminate against them. You're going to treat each country as your most favored nation, meaning you'll create a fair trade mechanism, provide a fair playing field for all the countries to increase trade. This is a mandatory requirement under WTO. Even though India had given MFN status to Pakistan, Pakistan never gave MFN status to India. And after Pulwama attacks, even India has suspended MFN status to Pakistan. So as Pakistan has not given MFN status, it's a deliberate break of an international norm. And for entry to groups like IORA, it's important to meet these basic criteria. If through IORA you're looking to promote economic ties, right? Under IORA, one objective is to promote economic relations. If Pakistan has not given MFN status to India, then Pakistan will not give us fair treatment. So this is one ground we have used to keep Pakistan out. Right? The main intention is to not have Pakistan in IORA because it has already destroyed SAARC. We have seen what Pakistan has done. We have discussed this in detail. So that is why we have kept Pakistan out of IORA by citing that it has not given us MFN status. Anshu is asking why India signed FTA separately with 3 countries. See, apart from regional FTAs, you might need bilateral FTAs as well. Like we do have a separate FTA with Malaysia, right? But that has taken a hit due to our geopolitical tensions. And with Japan, we have a separate FTA. Shreyank is asking, why isn't the West and US apologetic for colonization and Cold War era disruptions across the world? See, these colonial imperial powers, they won't apologize. They won't acknowledge the horrors of colonial rule and imperial rule and what even US has done in the Cold War era. Right? In Britain, for example, they don't even teach their children the horrors of colonialism. They still glorify colonialism. If you've ever seen what they teach in British schools, if you've seen their curriculum, because I have taken a look, you see that colonialism is glorified. They show that the British helped these backward civilizations to move forward. They claim they introduced cultural revolution, social and scientific revolution in these countries. That is far from reality. If you look at India, India was a far more advanced civilization. It was set back by British colonial rule, exploited brutally. The economy was destroyed, right? The society, culture was destroyed. Society was divided as well. So this is never taught in British curriculum. So there's no question of these countries apologizing. Of course they should. There are many who argue that they should apologize, pay reparations as well. But they never showed any inclination to apologize for the horrors they have done in the past. Kostov is asking what's the difference between FTA and SEPA? They're both the same. FTA is a generic name. Free trade agreement is a generic name. SEPA is the specific names which are given. SEPA, SECA, they're all the same. Just the names might be different. Kiru Bagar is asking, sir, Japan has no army or defense, it has only defense forces. What is the concern for China on Japan joining Malabar exercise? See, even though Japan has only self-defense forces, obviously Malabar is a military exercise. And since all the rivals of China, India, US, Australia, Japan are coming together under Malabar, China obviously opposes that. Deepika is asking, sir, why was India hesitant to develop defense strategic ties with Southeast and East Asian countries under Look East? And what has made India take bolder decisions under Act East? It's primarily the China factor. Also, under Look East, we got more focused on economic ties and cultural ties. Defense and strategic ties were given a slightly lower priority. But now, in the last 13 years, as China has become more aggressive and become a bigger threat, that has driven our approach to focus more on defense strategic ties as well. That's why after 2010, you see India's growing defense engagement across Southeast and East Asia. It's driven by Chinese aggression. So China factor and previous focus mainly on economic ties is what caused this difference. Deepika is asking what differentiates comprehensive strategic partnership from strategic partnership. Essentially, we are covering more sectors. That's what it means. So you don't have to go into the details. Strategic partnership covered few sectors. Comprehensive strategic partnership covered even more sectors with Vietnam. All right. So these are technical diplomatic changes. You don't have to bother about these changes. Shreyank is asking, since most ASEAN countries have threat from China, why aren't they united against China? That's because China has a lot of leverage on them. They're all dependent heavily on China. China has massive investments in all these Southeast Asian countries. All the Southeast Asian economies are dependent on the Chinese economy, on Chinese imports. China is a massive market as well for Southeast Asian exports. So if China wants, it can destroy Southeast Asian economies. That is the power leverage it has on these countries. So that is why, even though they have so many issues and threats from China, they are not united in their approach. Rahul is asking, what are the notable features of the recently concluded acquisition and cross-servicing agreement between India and Japan? How is it likely to address security concerns of India? See, of late we have been signing many such logistics exchange agreement. The agreement you're referring to, the cross-servicing agreement, it's essentially a logistics exchange agreement. These logistics exchange agreement will provide access to your armed forces to the military bases of another country. We have similar agreement with US, with Australia, with France as well, with UK. We're considering one with Russia. We have one with Japan, with South Korea also. The idea behind such logistics exchange agreement is to ensure that our armed forces, our Navy, Air Force, when they visit their countries and their regions, they can access their ports and naval bases and military bases to get refueling, resupplies, and logistical support. That will increase our operational range. Similarly, their forces, when they come here in Indian Ocean, we will provide access to our naval bases and air bases where they can get the logistical support needed. They can get refueling, resupplies, and any other support needed. So this is a mutual exchange of logistics that we provide for the armed forces. All right. So guys, these are the questions. Let's end the session for today. Do let me know how the class went. I hope you understood everything. Let's meet in the next class. We'll continue from here. We'll wrap it up. We'll look at the Pacific region as well. We'll look at Central Asia, West Asia. These are the key topics we have for the coming classes. So I'll see you tomorrow. Till then, take care. Have a good day.